All right, good evening. This work session of the School Board of Osseo Area Schools is being held in the forum room of the Educational Service Center on Tuesday, June 9th, 2026. The work session is being audio recorded. The recording will be made available on the district website within 2 business days after the work session is ended. With regard to the audio recording, our communication staff has asked that we share a friendly reminder that side conversations during the work session are picked up by the recorder and can affect sound quality. Also, conversations during transitions between agenda items are on the recording as well. The intent of the school board work session is to allow for school board discussion of topics. Work sessions do not include an opportunity for audience members to address the board. To acknowledge attendance this evening, I'll ask that all present at the table state their name, starting with the person to the left.
Tanya Prince, school board member.
Eric Foster, school board member.
Amy Tolson, incoming assistant superintendent.
Brian Severson Hall, executive director of community engagement.
Steve Flisk, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary and Middle School.
Kay Vallella, Executive Director of Community Relations.
Brian Bass, Assistant Superintendent for Equity Achievement in the high schools.
John Morstead, Executive Director of Finance and Operations.
Valerie Dilsland, District Lobbyist.
Yvonne Shorts-Land, Executive Director of HR.
Anthony Paradis, Executive Director of Technology.
Amy Moore, General Counsel.
Kim Heil, Superintendent.
And I, Thomas Brooks, school board member, am present. The purpose of school board work sessions is to build trust and teamwork, to exchange information, and, when applicable, to provide direction in order to facilitate efficient and effective decision-making at regular board meetings. Dr. Heil, will you please share your check-in?
Thank you, Vice Chair Brooks, Chair Prince, and school board members. We're excited today, and we have a full agenda, so we're going to get started right away, and we will be succinct. So, starting out with legislative update, John, if you want to introduce Valerie, please.
And just a quick introduction of Valerie Dilsland, the district's lobbyist, who is always working hard on our behalf, constantly down at the Capitol. It's fun to actually see her occasionally going, running, keeping us informed, keep bringing us in to do lobbying wherever she sees fit that matches our goals. So we appreciate you coming out, and we'll let her kind of walk through what happened with the session.
Thank you, school board members. Just setting kind of the stage of the 2026 legislative session, the context of how the session started. It continued to be a volatile political climate. There was, a DFL 1-seat majority in the Senate and the tied House. 2 of the members were running for governor. We were starting a session after the wake of the tragedies, the murder of Melissa Portman and her husband, and the shooting of Senator John Hoffman and his wife, and of course the tragedy at Annunciation. And then just hanging over everything too was ongoing challenges with state fraud and state programs. Operation Metro Surge kind of unfolded right before the legislative session began, and then a difficult budget forecast. And when the session was beginning and all the different conversations that we had with legislators, they said, don't expect much. I would add that more passed than I was anticipating based on the comments from legislators. So the supplemental, so there wasn't one education budget bill like we're used to. There was many different bills and provisions put in different pots here and there. And to be honest, it was quite hard to track. I don't know how anyone from the public would have followed along. There was a supplemental budget bill that did provide $10 million in one-time funding for a hold harmless on compensatory revenue to try to prevent a stopgap while the compensatory work group does its work. Really what was needed was more like $55 million. What ended up passing was $10 million. And then there was funding one-time grants for anonymous threat reporting systems. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. There was also another bill that we call a forecast adjustment bill, which just basically aligns the education budget numbers with what is in the forecast. There were a few provisions in there also related to education. One was highly qualified paraprofessionals in Title I. It allowed more flexibility for those paras in Title I programs to meet requirements to be federal requirements for highly qualified, and it just aligns those mostly with what is in special ed pairs now. School districts were also allowed to use operating capital revenue for utility costs. And then there was a education policy bill that popped up on the last day of session. There's some redact changes. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but the kind of two items of note that I think would be of interest to the district is this school districts extends the option for school districts to reduce instruction by 5.5 hours for teachers to receive redact training through the 26-27 school year. You've had this extension the last several years, it just extends it for one more. And then there's a provision that would exclude teaching candidates who are enrolled in a teacher prep program as of June 1st from additional training requirements once they begin employment at the school district. So that means when you hire new teachers who met this requirement, you do not have to give them additional redact training. Standalone bill passed, we're calling it the anti-grooming bill. I don't know if you paid attention to any of the news about this student, Hannah Lopresto, who was groomed and assaulted by a teacher. She was a very strong advocate and moved forward with changes. A couple of the key items of that bill were it allows PELSB to suspend or revoke a teacher's license for someone convicted of grooming. Requires local law enforcement to notify the statewide licensing agency, MDE and PELSB, when a licensed educator is charged with certain crimes, including grooming. And then there's added to the mandatory reporter training, and that you have to update that training to reflect education on what grooming is. A big issue this session was whether or not school districts would receive school safety aid. Because of a disagreement with the governor and the House and Senate, the Democrats and the Republicans on aid for non-public schools, no agreement was reached. They did end up providing $12.25 million in schooling mental health grants. It's one time, and that's on top of an ongoing appropriation, but that is how they resolve their differences on trying to get at some school safety measures. There will be a ballot question on the November ballot this year on the permanent school fund. And what the permanent school fund is, it's a trust that revenue from land all across Minnesota, from proceeds that are gained from either timber harvesting, mineral leases on land all across Minnesota that goes into this permanent school trust. The Constitution dictates how much of that funding goes to schools. There will be a question on the ballot to amend the Constitution to change how that funding is distributed. What that means is it would mean right now districts get about $68 per pupil. The same districts get the same everywhere. This means districts would get about $40 to $50 more per pupil. So it would bring in some general revenue. And doesn't result in a tax increase. It's just taking funds that are in this trust and allowing more of the distribution to be allocated to school districts on a per pupil basis. And then lastly, just a couple provisions were passed in a pensions bill. I think two of note, if a district or if an employer across all the public pension plans, whether it's TRA or PERA or MSRS, if they re-employ a retired teacher, this employer would now be required to make a pension contribution to that pension system. And then also it extends the suspension of the earnings limitations for a teacher who returns to teaching service through 2030. So they can earn more within those 3 years without having a penalty on their retirement. So even though session just ended, we're already preparing for the 2027 legislative session. It's an election year. The district has two notable members who are not running for re-election. One is Senator Warren Limmer, and the other is Representative Kristen Robbins. There are a very large number of legislators departing from the legislature this year, about 20% or so. And then it's an election for the governor's office, and we don't yet know who our candidates are on the Republican side, but Senator Klobuchar is the candidate on the DFL side. So regardless of what happens, there will be a new administration, new staff working at the upper levels of the administration. So there will be some change. And then also issues that we're watching are, one, the Blue Ribbon Commission on Special Ed. There's a pending $250 million cut if that commission cannot find the savings. The legislature, the House Education Finance Committee did pass a bill to repeal that budget reduction. It didn't go anywhere after that, though. So the weight of a $250 million cut weighs on everyone really heavily. So we're watching that closely. They have to have a report due to the legislature by October 1st. The legislature has to act on those recommendations. And if they don't, then that $250 million will be cut. And I think it's accurate to say that that cut is the top priority for all of the different education organizations who are following and working to try to repeal that cut. The other one I talked about, the Compensatory Revenue Task Force. Their report is due on the 15th of October, and that they are responsible for coming up with a new formula for how compensatory revenue is distributed. And then unemployment insurance funding, that the legislature appropriated money last year. It was only for 2 years, so that money will eventually run out. So we will have to be advocating for some kind of either repeal of that proposal or ongoing funding for that requirement. This session, Education Minnesota moved forward on a bill to establish a statewide mandatory health insurance pool. It did get a number of hearings, but it did advance. But that is something, depending on what happens with the election, that's highly likely to continue to move forward. And one item tied to that I forgot to mention that did pass is every year Education Minnesota does a data request on requesting information on health insurance data. That was passed into a law that directs the Legislative Budget Office to survey every school district. So school districts will be getting a survey in September from the Legislative Budget Office asking for detailed information on their health insurance. And then another proposal that came up and did receive a hearing that could come back next year depending on what happens with the election is minimum compensation requirements for teachers and non-licensed staff. And so those are a couple of the issues that we're watching. I think a lot depends on what happens with the election. And then just real quickly regarding the Osseo area schools legislative priorities, I think a lot of the items I have more details in the platform, but I just wanted my update. But I just wanted to note, while a lot of the provisions didn't necessarily pass, they still did receive attention. You know, school safety received attention. We did not have to deal even with the budget deficit. We didn't have to deal with a repeal of inflation on the per pupil formula. Summer unemployment did not pass, but we know that many conversations were had with legislators about the impact on districts if that's not funded and such, but I wanted to just note those as well. Sometimes success is getting the bill introduced, sometimes it's having the conversation to set up for future discussions. And then one item I forgot to mention is there was legislation to prohibit screen time in grades K through 2. And so that is also an issue I think will come back, and I've had numerous conversations with Anthony about that, and it's something we'll be working on in the future term.
Any questions?
I just had a really specific question about that grooming law that you mentioned. So I don't know if you have the answer to it, but do you know if it applies to if the incident occurred in a non-educational environment, like if it occurred outside the school, would that still be reported to the school district or Pellsby and to Pellsby?
I believe so. I have to look at the bill.
It's a crime, right? That they've made it a crime, so it would be the responsibility for the police to report it to a school district.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, very thorough. Thank you.
Valerie, can you add a little more context to the cell phone prohibition?
That's something we're watching. It continues to be an issue of the Senate did have a provision in a policy bill that didn't advance, that would have banned. It would have directed school districts to have a policy to ban cell phones, but it didn't advance. It's something that keeps popping up,
Okay.
and I think will be tied to conversation on screen time. But I think that's going to have probably a little more traction than this cell phone issue, but I think it will be tied to it.
And would the ban be for high school as well? Was it all grades?
The proposal was to ban cell phones, period, unless there's exceptions if the student student needed it for a medical issue or to accommodate IEP or 504 plan. I hope that was succinct enough.
No, thank you. Oh, I didn't need a pressure.
I know, I have a lot of pressure. I was like, oh no.
Vice Chair Brooks is rubbing off on me.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you
That
very
was great.
much.
Thanks, Val.
And I did appreciate the updates you sent out through John.
Mhm.
That was really helpful to see as time went on through the year, so thank you for doing that.
All right, so we're going to move on. We're going to have a presentation around vision cards A and B, and does your team get settled, or? Oh, there's more of them. Dr. Bass will introduce our
Yeah,
team
introduce
here
them.
then. Keep scooching, John. Keep scooching.
All right, thank you, Dr. Ohio, Chair Prince, Vice Chair Brooks, members of the board. We are excited about sharing with you our data from Strategic Directions A and B. Joining me this evening are the Dream Team, the directors from Student Services, Sunny Burskin, Educational Equity, Dr. Michael Walker, Director of Learning and Achievement, Dr. Joe Kind, and then we also have two guests that are sharing about their site experience within the Continuous Improvement Magnifier from Early Childhood and Family Education Coordinator Kari Sawyer and Assistant Principal at Northview Middle School, Randy Anderson. So they will be joining and sharing a little bit about their experience with that work. Okay. So our presentation outcomes are to learn about and discuss the data measures for the high priority initiatives for strategic directions A and B, and explore the alignment between our priorities, our system strategies, to try to achieve those priorities, and the measures that show the implementation fidelity of those strategies, as well as the impact that they're having in our system. Again, this is a slide you've seen many times. Vision cards serve as a critical data point toward the realization of our mission. And so you see that that relationship between the roadmap that the board has provided as our overview, our strategic directions, our vision cards measure our progress towards those strategic directions. The alignment across the system takes place within our improvement plans or our operational plans for school and departments. And then we come back to you all and share in our monitoring report that detailed data. Here in this presentation, we're sharing the high-level data from the monitoring report. So again, tonight, strategic directions A and B, and so those are the pieces of data that we'll be sharing in alignment with those two strategic directions. And then I shared that we have two folks representing sites that have really leaned into the intentionality behind continuous improvement magnifier. What are the ineffective procedures which create disparities, barriers, and inequities? And a second question, how do our continuous improvement cycles and processes help address and eliminate disparities and inequities in achievement? This is another visual representation of that alignment across the system that starts from our strategic plan, adopted by the board, the superintendent and cabinet, our departments, our site leaders, teachers, all the way to the scholars, showing how our initiatives drive all the way throughout the organization into the scholar experience. So last year we started really being intentional about showing how the work that's happening, that's trying to influence our outcome measures, that shows the impact that we're having, how do we make all of that visible? And so we borrowed the framework from Educational Resource Strategy, System Strategy, Return on Investment, and this is the OSCOIs. Dr. Howell likes to say this, OSCOIs. So this is the OSCOIs version, courtesy of the brilliance of Dr. Kind and its format. So, and we'll walk through Strategic Direction A at this time.
And Strategic Direction A is about creating the type of learning environment that fosters curiosity, belonging, innovation, and engagement. as Dr. Bass said, this is that 10,000-foot overview of one goal within strategic direction A, and that is around increasing students' sense of safety, belonging, and inclusion. And the primary strategy is positive behavior intervention supports. Our process measures and our outcome measures are there. And then also connecting the strategic direction work to our operational plan. And so this is a slice of the district's operational plan that lists our strategies. And the primary one is the Minnesota Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. And underneath that, there are two additional, more maybe specific strategies. One is about improving that Tier 1 cultural system, so SEL, PBIS, to model and reinforce belonging. But also, how are we providing students who need additional support, Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports, so that we can maybe do some preventative work before students escalate. The process measures are the Tier 1 fidelity checks and completed each fall and spring with the TIPI, which is in the monitoring report. And then our new and upcoming intervention tracking system and using that consistently across the system. And lastly, our outcomes, which are both survey outcomes. One is the Minnesota Student Survey and the other one is our internal survey. And we'll talk about the continuous improvement magnifier on this one a little bit. So as I said before, PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Intervention Supports. It's lived in our standard work in Osseo area schools for a number of years. Beginning with the 26-27 school year, we're going to really bring back a more intentional focus to that by really grading it with our M&MTSS work around academics, so that we're having one conversation about social and emotional learning and academics and really paying attention to that. We know there's a strong relationship between the two, and we want to make sure that we're communicating that by modeling that for our sites. This is the Minnesota Student Survey data. It's given every 3 years to students in grades 5, 8, 9, and 11. The following survey question has been used on previous vision cards and was included in the 2025 survey. That question is, during the last 30 days, how many days have other students at school pushed, shoved, slapped, hit, or kicked you when they weren't kidding around, or spread mean rumors or lies about you? And we are still at that 7.6, that's baseline range. And so what that 7.6 means is that out of a scale of 8, 8 would mean that no students experienced bullying in the past, that behavior in the past 30 days. And so we're at 7.6, we're just shy of that 8 threshold. That data hasn't changed since the previous administration. You'll see that there's not a score for safety, and that's because they tweaked the questions in that category, so we couldn't compare between the 2022 survey and the 2025 survey. The Osseo Student Survey, this is the last year for this version of the student survey to be used. This shows that the data remains in the baseline yellow range for the last 3 administrations. This year we had 12,833 3rd through 12th graders complete the survey, and that's 72% of all eligible students. And so when we think about survey responses, that's a really good number that we want, and so we're happy with that number. The student focus groups have wrapped for the year on the revisions for the student survey. And over the summer, survey items will be developed and grouped into scales. And because we want to make sure that the questions continue to give us valid and reliable data, we'll do some piloting in the winter with select grades in classrooms and then go back and make any revisions. And then we'll do a full launch in spring 2027 and bring those results to you next year. Just looking at the last last of this version, there are 3 scales on the vision card: belonging, help, and trust. Our data either remained consistent from 2025 results or had a 1 to 2% decrease, with the largest decrease being the school rules are fair, and the largest increase in the question about being comfortable sharing your thoughts and ideas at school. This next slide represents positive responses grouped by race. The green dotted line represents the benchmark, which is the median across all groups. American Indian, Asian, Black, Hispanic, and multiracial students were all below benchmark. This year we had 2,005 families complete the family survey. Again, with this administration, we use a random quota sampling to ensure that responses mirrored the demographics of the district. On the vision card for the Safe, Welcoming, and Inclusive Learning Environment scales, we reached progress level. This scale has 8 questions. Responses to the question, my scholar's cultural history is represented accurately in the curriculum, had a 5% increase since the last survey administration. My scholar feels safe at school, and my scholar sees how their learning connects to the real world. Both saw 4% increases. This slide examines the scale as a whole and shows that all racial groups are above the benchmark, which is about 75.5%. Students receiving free and reduced price meals, multilingual services, and special education services, as well as male and females, are also reporting positive responses on the safe, welcoming, and inclusive learning environment scale, and all are above benchmark. Lastly, if we look at the family survey by level, early childhood and elementary had the highest positive responses, while middle school had the highest increase in positive responses. Now we'll turn it over to Dr. Walker, Director of Educational Equity, to talk about the Continuous Improvement Magnifier.
Good evening, everyone. Appreciate being here. And before I turn over to the school sites to share their story, I just want to take a moment to really reflect on the year-long process that our equity teams engaged in throughout the year. And it's really about how do we eliminate and really identify the disparities and inequities that we see within our system. And so obviously we were doing that through the equity transformation cycle that we had. And so throughout the school year, our teams came together and participated in these seminars that we had. We had 4 seminars throughout the year. We partnered with Shane Saphir and Joe Truss to really work on our work and their work around street data. And so we looked at these 4 components: listening, uncover, reimagine, and then move. And so as we think about the year-long process, we kind of met in August, November, February, and then in May. And so in August, we really focused on listening and trying to build trust, establishing a shared purpose, and sharing the experiences of students, families, and staff members to better understand how we can serve the best in our schools and in their communities. So then in November, we came together, and then the team started working on how do we uncover what is beneath all this information, right, the surface, by examining data and really trying to get into that street level data, right, around interviewing students, doing empathy interviews, trying to understand what their experiences was so we can make some adjustments to how we are showing up in our system. And then in February, we came together, and obviously we know that there was an issue with Metro Surge, and so while that was happening and taking place, we still wanted to stay focused on the equity work. And so teams came together, and we really started to say, how can we remain focused on the equity goals while still trying to develop actionable strategies to address the barriers, expand opportunities for our students. So again, the Metro Surge did show up, but then we stayed focused on what we were trying to accomplish, and we didn't let it take us off our path. And then finally, in May, we did a public learning experience where all the sites came together and one of our dates and kind of shared where they were in that journey, right? Obviously, with Metro Surge, some things kind of didn't go as planned. We had to make some adjustments, and so not everybody made it all the way through the cycle. However, we still was able to come together, learn from each other, share our stories, and then get feedback from other school sites to learn what we can do better for next year, next time. And so, again, that just really is powerful to see our leaders learn in the moment and then trying to apply that information to how they're going to move forward. And so tonight we're going to hear directly from a couple of sites. We have Randy from Northwood Middle and then Ms. Sawyer from Early Childhood. And so I'll let you all take it away and share your experiences of the equity transformation cycle.
Do I see it? Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So I'm Randy. I'm the assistant principal over at Northview. And a couple of things to know about Northview before we dig in. Northview is a really special place. I really think that when you step through the doors, it just feels different. And with that, I think one of the biggest strengths is our diversity. With that, it's diversity in culture, languages spoken, skills the kids have, tons of knowledge that they bring, family brings, the community brings. With that means that meeting everybody where they are looks differently. And so trying to figure out how do we support all kiddos? What does that look like? How do we support all families? So with that, our transformational cycle was grounded in the idea of being focused on the disproportionality in student outcomes for students who identify as Black and receive special education services. So again, a little bit with that, we are the only Title I middle school in the district, and we also, compared to the district average for students who receive services at about 13%, we're at about 18.5%, sometimes a little bit higher than that. And so it was really important to us to focus in on these kiddos and how to best serve them and their families. And so looking at the satellite data, the MCAs, looking at map data, and again, so many other data points, right? But map data, looking at growth scores, down to that street data, the conversations, the experience, the re-entry meetings with families, right? It was clear that there is disproportionality and we needed to hear from them. With that, we went to listening. That's the first step. And so we conducted empathy interviews, and something that we really appreciated is we started this work 2 years ago, and instead of just up and moving and disrupting and starting something new again, we got to dive deeper in this last year. And so with that, we stayed with that same focus area. We know that social, emotional, behavioral, academic, they all do intertwine. And so we have to hear about their experiences as a whole to start to reimagine and make moves. So with that, with the empathy interviews, we continued. We met with every student who identified as Black and received special education services, and we were intentional in our approach of even who was doing the interviews. They didn't have to be on our equity team. It should be someone who would really get those real answers from them. We expanded that to families and caregivers this past year. And then we moved on to the Uncover stage. And with that, we had 3 key themes that came through that really stuck out to our equity team and our greater school community. With that, one was peer culture. Now, I think middle school is the best. With that, one thing that's developmentally expected is that peer perception is number 1, right? We can think about and families can think about what they would love for their child, right, at the end of the day. But it's really, what is, the student sitting next to me think, right? It's that peer perception. So what does it mean to be a Northview student, and how do we change that culture of it's a place that we learn, it's a place that we grow, that we support each other, that we belong, right? The second piece was discipline perception. We talk so much and we provide PD on restorative practices. We really focus on it. We have a passion in it. And with that, what we heard is that families and students feel like discipline is being done to them versus really partnering with families in those supports, right? So coming back, okay, we're uncovering that. What else? We also noticed, now again with middle school, a lot of times they get to 6th grade, they know they have this thing called an IEP, but all of a sudden it becomes this other. Right? I'm different than my peer. I might go to a class that my peer does not go to. So how do we change the perception around that, not only for the student, but for the community, and again, in that acceptance. We are such a diverse place with so many different strengths, and how do we show the kiddos and their families that too? It's not a negative to have an IEP or receive services, and the strengths and the beautiful things that come from it. So from that, we started to reimagine. When we reimagine, again, just like it's easy to disrupt and change course and fall into those tropes of doing something different again, because our data is still not great. What can we do better, right? But we continued, and we wanted to notice a couple things that we did not want to stray from. One of which is AVID. Not just the elective class, but when it comes to our student outcome data, AVID is one of the best things for our kiddos and their growth across the board. Just historically, and looking at last year and this year specifically, it is a huge area of impact, and so we wanted to continue it. And how can we, again, play into that culture piece where AVID's not just an elective class? How does it look to be an AVID school, to have that culture, to be college and career going? Composition of our equity team. Last year we added a education support professional, again for another lens. If we're serving our kiddos who receive services, they sometimes work closest with those kiddos. So we added one to our team, and then going into next year, again focused on discipline, we're adding a student management specialist. He'll be our 7th grade SMS. We'll be joining our equity team to again build on that lens. And then again, partnering with our caregivers. Just like we do with our kiddos, making sure that our families, it's not we engage our families, it's reciprocal, right? We're engaging them, they're engaging us, we're teaming, we're partnering, we're doing with, and they're doing with us. With that, I just want to highlight, Dr. Walker noted we did a public learning experience in May, and I would say across the board, we are partnered with 279 Online. I don't think they'll mind me sharing. But we said time and time again how valuable that time was to hear from one another, to hear the work being done, to be able to challenge others' thinking, and then it again allowed them then to challenge ours, and to be able to get excited about next year and some of the opportunities that we'll be able to continue to learn from each other and from our kiddos. One of which we heard about shadowing for students. Again, us as staff shadowing kiddo experiences, we heard them do it, we've talked about it, now we have some ways to actually do so. So a little bit from Northview. Thank you.
Andy.
Sorry, a lot of time.
I'm never going to say that again.
Well, I have a script, so I don't anything. But my name is Kari Sawyer. I'm the coordinator for our early childhood and family education program. So that includes our ECFE birth to 5-parent-child classes, ECFE home visits, preschool screening, and our school readiness preschool and pre-K. And our equity team is pictured here, includes a representation from each of our program areas, teaching staff, ESPs, leadership, and then multilingual and Department of Equity staff members. So our overall focus this year has been on the concept of holism from street data, so focusing on the whole family, the whole child, and that's really what we do. We're always working with the family in early childhood. And then I worked really closely with Lee Bang from the multilingual department, and we created a roadmap for the year for our equity meetings, and that included some off-site experiences. So you can see a picture of our team. We went to Munn Village for one of our meetings, and she kind of showed us around. But our main goal that we were looking at this year was supporting our multilingual students, and particularly those that are new to the country, with a focus on fostering that sense of belonging and really just keeping that holism at the center. In our preschool pre-K program alone, we have over 40 languages represented in about our 450 students. So an area that we found could use some improvement was supporting transitions for our multilingual families. For example, the transition to starting preschool. They may not know what that looks like, and how can we be there to really talk them through, support them, be there, and know that they can just always reach out with any questions. So based on this area of need, one of our teachers, parent educator, began offering home visits to families who had requested some additional support to help get their child ready for preschool. And then in addition to offering home visits, classroom support was offered by some of our parent educators so they could support. Sometimes can be hard if you have not dropped off your child before, so just supporting that separation process. And then we also offered some virtual sessions on things like toilet learning, because that's one of the things, like how do you support that at home and in the classroom. So this summer we're also adding what we're calling a preschool basics ECFE class, where parents can come with their children and they'll be new to starting preschool this fall, so they'll give them kind of a 4-week taste of what that looks like and help them kind of practice separation and learn about some of the things that they'll be encountering when they drop them off that first day of school in the fall. Let's see. And then in addition to supporting transitions, our work with Hui Bang, she also offered an all-staff professional development session at the end of April on building trust with multilingual families. So staff were able to share what they're already doing in their classes to build relationships and trust with families, and then to highlight and elevate our students in our classroom spaces, just to make sure they have that sense of belonging. Our equity team this year also completed empathy interviews, which were done with some families, staff, and then some of our young learners. So that was kind of fun to see what they had to say. Overall, so we used a lot of smiley faces, and, but overall they shared that they just enjoyed school and felt valued. Staff that were interviewed felt included and valued. And then one of the goals that we found with just starting that process of empathy interviews is we really want to continue that with parents too, like just continuing our focus of including and having more parent voice at the table, because our parents, especially in early childhood, are so involved. And I always think of early childhood too, like we're kind of the gateway into the school district, so I think we have a really great opportunity there to just start out by showing families that we're there to support them and walk alongside them with their students. So those are the things that we worked on this year with that sense of holism, and then we're just really kind of excited to continue our learning for next year. So,
And before I give it back over, Dr. Nash, for the pause and process, if you all just hear the stories that were shared with these two sites, we have to really think about how powerful this opportunity is. It's like, we don't have to come in and know all the answers, but how do we leverage our relationships with our communities, with our students, to gather insight from them, and then how do we apply that to make sure that we are serving our students and our families better in the ways that they say is better, not the ways that we think is better. And so this is really powerful that we get the opportunity to do this, and I'm really appreciative of the building leaders and sites and departments who are all engaging in this work, because it shows our commitment to wanting to serve our students and families the best that we can. So I appreciate you all. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
So this is that moment in the vision card process where we pause and have some discussion as a board. I'm not sure if you have any specific questions of our two guests, or if we want to just jump right into more reflections and pause part. Do you have a preference?
No, you guys have questions you want to jump into?
I had a question for Northview. Definitely that realization of, like, with the IEP, you're feeling different. It just kind of made me more aware, how do we continue to have that strength-based perspective and opportunities, so that it's not like always, it feels like there's more support for when there's like a gap versus kind of focusing on those opportunities where students have strengths. So it's, I guess, just a reflection, or kind of how do you guys think about that strength-based kind of perspective at Northview?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's two pieces of it, right? It's the connecting with that kiddo and processing through with them and their family too. Families as well, right? A lot of times you're along for the ride, especially if there's language barriers and things like that. And so with that kiddo, it's processing through, letting them ask questions, and then having them identify, right? We don't need to tell them all the things that they're amazing at. They know if we give them the space to do so, right? And we ask those questions where they can share and they can come to their own and like find areas for them to participate, right? In those strength areas. And so I think there's that individual piece, and then we've tried a couple different things this year since I'm covering that perception. And so we've tried some mini lessons in classrooms. A word that has become an insult now is a student calling other students fed. And it's usually from a student who receives services themselves. And so talking through and having conversations, it's opportunity for restorative, for reflection, and for teaching about what it means, right, and what it doesn't mean. And so I think there's kind of those two different pieces, and again, it plays into the culture, right? If we want to use kind words, if we're using powerful words that uplift each other, right? What can we use instead, right? And all those pieces that go with it. So I think there's so much, and we're still learning about it too, and we're still learning from the kids and the families as well. And what they need to move forward, what would help them to feel accepted and help them to kind of come into their own. Like middle school it's like such a fun time because they're building that identity, and it's really important that they're noticing their strengths and building that identity. And so we're just trying to partner with them in doing so. But I don't think we have it figured out yet.
The only comment I had, just to reflect back with you guys, was just I appreciated how you're putting yourselves in their shoes, and even just what you shared tonight, I was able to step into two very unique scenarios, and the ages are so wide, and the kids we provide services for in general, and so I think that's just such a great focus to have and like to be centered around. So thank you so much for that, both of you.
Yeah, it's cool to finally see some examples of the equity transformation cycles that we keep hearing about as a board. What I appreciated about both is they were both very student and family centered, which I know is always our goal. And I wish that there was some creative way to tell our families what we're doing, especially, I mean, empathy interviews of preschoolers, like that's that's awesome. I mean, preschoolers sometimes talk more than high schoolers, so it's, you know, I just thank you both for what you're doing, and you know, please tell our families what you're doing too.
Okay, so transitioning to our pause and process, I think in light of time, I wonder if when we think about this particular vision card, we have perception data, we have Minnesota Student Survey, we have our Student Stakeholders Survey that's under construction. You saw the under construction sides in the slides. I think what might be helpful, selfishly, that first question around the alignment check. How well do you feel like that perception data measures when we say safe, welcoming, and inclusive? How well do you feel like that perception data is helpful in giving you and the public some transparency around these things? So I think that's something, if we could give you 5 minutes to talk about in discussion, like together, and then come back and share some of your thoughts. Does that work? We take 5 minutes for a little bit of discussion.
Sure.
You all first. Okay. All right. Thank you. Set the timer.
Do we have to break down?
We all won't just stare at you.
Okay, so my first thought is that student and family stakeholder perception data is effective.
Yeah, you know, student perception versus the family perception.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know, I mean, it's valuable to have both, but I just feel like in terms of discussions around student experience, for me, like it's more valuable to know more from our students in those situations. I can complete a family stakeholder survey, but do I really know their experience on a day-to-day basis in high school?
Yeah, or even middle school. Yep, totally valid.
They went pretty big jump on the family survey, so that may reflect like focus on communication between families, but it may not reflect reality.
Yes, exactly, and that's what it feels like.
It might be a good anchored data point. Does that make sense? Like, because my kids at least have ups and downs emotionally and experiences. So maybe they're an anchor, and that can be a good question. What's the purpose behind having that?
Or like, what are they sharing, not sharing with their parents?
Yes, yes.
Too. I think these questions are really helpful, and I think they're good alignment with what we're trying to measure. The summary measures are a little still kind of, I don't know how meaningful they are.
I know, yeah.
Scales and whatnot, if we put this out, that would just mean anything, but.
Undercover street math.
Chelsea, her questions brings it up late in the next section, but the gaps in students of color. Still.
Well, and I'm always curious, my question on that is what follow-up questions are we asking to validate those responses and like understand the why behind them? Because it can't just be asking the question, getting, how do we know why are they responding that low? What is driving that answer? Because it was mostly the students, correct?
Yeah, the parents jumped up.
Yeah.
Too, where she's around.
And in particular, it looks like it was Black and Hispanic students that were down.
Yes. Well, and so can they add a question of, like, circle the top two issues that caused you to rate low, or respond positively, or something like that. You can ask and serve as questions.
Yeah. Well, and when we're testing for the design.
Oh, yeah.
You good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're ready.
Ready. We have another minute. Efficiency is the through line.
It's easier when there's just three.
Okay, and we're back.
So we were noticing kind of the gap in the student perception and the family perception. It was great to see the families jump up, but we had wonderings about that. That may indicate that we're doing a better job communicating, but is it actually like reflecting the students' experiences since they're reporting differentially? And then as well as kind of the lower student survey results for Black and Hispanic students. How are we understanding more about that? Which was kind of our general, seeing the survey results for students, but then kind of wondering what's beneath that, like why, and kind of curious about the next revisions to the student survey. Like, are we going to get more qualitative with the quantitative? Like, why are they answering that way?
So like for the trusting adults, if they don't respond positively, can we find out what's driving that? So it's not just, we want to change that. So how can we improve it?
And then as far as the metrics, kind of the alignment, like, the survey data is rich and good, but I think like the scales probably wouldn't be meaningful to the community. And I think, so I don't know as far as like kind of our, like, somebody picking up the vision card and looking at the 7.6 probably isn't going to be meaningful to them, but.
It's helpful at the board level.
So I guess like what action gets taken on the student survey? Like what happens with that data at the sites?
So we share it with the school counseling group, the school social workers and the psychologists, and they use it to do programming and things like that. Because it's not every grade, it's only at big transition points. So then We also use it in some of our curriculum reviews to make sure that we're covering the topics that students maybe need some more learning in. And then what happens at the sites is it really depends on what that site-specific data is. So some sites use it to do group lessons with their counselor. Some sites use it in their Tier 2 interventions. So there's some variety.
I think this would have been a good topic for like our student reps. With what you just said, it would be nice as a future follow-up to have some of that data from students. I don't know if you're doing holding space or if the counselors are doing interviews with students, but it would be much more helpful for us to have additional context into what students are experiencing versus just seeing this number on the scale. And so, yeah, I don't know what that looks like as a follow-up, but maybe as an ongoing practice, some additional context would be helpful.
One of our high schools did center the student stakeholder survey in their student management goal and did hold several listening sessions and empathy interviews with their high school students. But we didn't do that like all the high schools did because they got to choose which focus for their site. But we do have an example of what that would look like.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Rolling into strategic direction B, which is build and nurture a culture of achievement. Again, here is that 10,000-foot view of the culture of achievement priority and the goal of students meeting expected growth on A, reading, and strategies of professional learning teams, high-quality core instruction, process measure of learning walks, and our outcome measure of our A, reading screening data. Again, a snapshot of the district operational plan with the strategy of the MTSS framework, implementing that Tier 1 core instruction, and building leader capacity to observe, coach, and grow rigorous instructional practices. We have 2 outcome measures. I'll describe those in more detail later. One piece of data that's not in our operational plan or on the vision card or the monitoring report is around early literacy. The READ Act has provided us with some additional screening information and additional screeners on specific skills that students are growing.
The slide is not in the packet. Is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I saw you all looking for it.
No, we asked.
Thank you, Dr. Hahn.
Slow down those emails. No, I'm just kidding.
The measure on the screen is kindergarten growth in the skill of word segmenting. So it may not seem like a big skill, but it's about breaking apart words in order to hear their individual sounds, which helps with 2 important skills that we want to build, which is decoding or reading and encoding, which is spelling. So what we see on the screen is that 18% of our kindergartners made typical growth, so that 50th to 74th percentile, but 57% of our kindergartners made aggressive growth. This really points to that it's a strong leading indicator for us as we move into 1st grade, and it points to some really strong work with our Tier 1 instruction in phonics. This graph looks at student scoring in the low risk and very low risk categories. So on A, reading, student scores are put into 4 categories: low risk, very low risk, high risk, and some risk. When we add the low risk and very low risk together, we want those numbers to be as close to 80% as possible. That's our goal. That 80% represents a benchmark of being, what we say, meeting grade level expectations. What we see here is that we still have some growth to do to get to that 80%, but we also see that students are growing when they're in the low risk and very low risk categories. Once we're there, we're keeping them there. So between 24-25 and 25-26, all grade levels made progress. 11th and 12th grade were just added to screening for the first time per the READ Act. This is some promising data for us to look at. A piece of data that is not in the monitoring report or vision card is our fall to winter growth data. So I'm going to make sure that we have an understanding of our terms here. So growth by START score takes all students nationally who have the same START score and compares them. And then we have typical growth. That's students who grow between the 50th and 74th percentile. And then aggressive growth, if we're growing above the 75th percentile or above. And one of the things that we can think about is this is a 2nd through 12th grade comparison. It's a ruler, right? And so you may get one score as a 2nd grader that represents where you're at. You can still grow if you're a 12th grader when you get that score. It means something different because the test is adaptive. So this data says that in fall to winter, which would be September to the January screener, we have 25% of students had typical growth, and 19% of students had aggressive growth. So if we think about that, that's 44% of our students are making expected growth at that time. That's fall to winter. And then winter hit. The fall to spring growth, which is what is reported on our vision cards and monitoring report, saw only 21% of students have typical growth and 10% of students have aggressive growth, which is 31% of expected growth. So one of the things that's very fascinating about this data is that typically we see less growth fall to winter than we do from fall to spring. And so this is some curious data for us. And I think one factor to acknowledge is the factor of Metro Surge. The move to temporary online learning provided students with connection and instruction, but not in the same way as being in their classroom with their peers, their teachers who had to have connections with and routines established. The emotional toll it took on students, families, and staff. The other factor is the people who support the teachers in doing teaching and providing them feedback, the staff development assessment specialists across the departments. They were the ones doing the teaching during temporary online learning, so they weren't able to support the teachers as much in making those adjustments and the differentiation. So all of those are some compounding factors. One of the things that we're working on right now as we transition data personnel is taking the students who were in temporary online learning and teasing out what their actual achievement data was on these tests. So that is some work that is ongoing for our department. So this graph represents the decrease by 10% in typical growth from the 24-25 to the 25-26 school year. This graph shows typical growth broken down by race. Multiracial, Black, and white students had increases in the percentage of students who had typical growth, while Hispanic and American Indian students had decreases in their typical growth. This graph shows typical growth by grade level. 5th grade, which is light gray, and 10th grade, the green line, both had increases. 2nd grade, 7th grade, 6th grade all held steady, and other grades experienced declines. If we look at growth between elementary school, middle school, and high school, the typical growth is the purple. The aggressive growth is the marigold. Our data looks remarkably similar, with middle school and high school having less aggressive growth than elementary school. Then if we look at aggressive growth, our aggressive growth data remains the same. 10% of our students experience growth at the 75th percentile or above. And this graph shows aggressive growth broken down by race. White, Black, Asian students had the same amount of aggressive growth as previous years, while multiracial, Hispanic, and American Indians had less aggressive growth. So the Department of Learning and Achievement spent a lot of time thinking about this data and trying to figure out what's next. We've talked a lot about it. We talked about the Metro Surge impact, and I've talked previously about that implementation dip. We're in it right now for sure, and we can't ignore it. So what are the adult actions and adult moves that we're going to do next? So there are 6, I think here. Curriculum pacing verification. We know that we had some differences in where we're at with curriculum. So in week 28 of the school year, we shouldn't be on week 11 in the curriculum, right? We've just now done a disservice to that student. So how do we get into classrooms to make sure that we're on pace with that? Getting back in to do those learning walks to determine professional learning needs. Do we have sites that are accelerating here? We heard from the 2 leaders who were here earlier, the power in learning from each other. How can we get them to share across those sites about what they're doing? Making sure that all students are screened so we know what additional supports they may need. Ensuring that we have our core plans created so that we're aligning our teacher goals to our student learning outcomes and monitoring that. Achievement growth measures this fall at Data Digs will establish some achievement goals based off of the fall screening data and work with leaders and the instructional leadership teams to say, okay, by winter, this is the number of students that we need to move. So what are those intentional and instructional moves that we're going to make and monitor to get there? Working with, and then we're switching screeners at the 6th grade through 12th grade level to CAPTI, which gives us more of that kindergarten-like data, like what skill exactly is it can we pinpoint to provide more direct support on. Working with instructional leadership teams to ensure that we're using high leverage moves to monitor Tier 1 instruction, and just really continuing to provide high quality professional learning that's aligned to student learning outcomes and teacher learning needs. Switching gears, we now return to the family survey and the culture of achievement scale. These 6 questions make up this scale, with staff know my school scholars' interest having the greatest increase by 5%. And staff believe my scholar can succeed. At 90% of families responded positively to that question. This graph breaks down the family survey by race and shows that families of American Indian students, Black students, and Hispanic students all responded more positively than in previous surveys. And this graph shows the same scale by service group and gender. All groups either responded more positively or had no change than previous administrations of the family survey. For the continuous improvement magnifier, strategic direction B, we look at the relationship between ineffective procedures and continuous improvement. And Sunny Burskin, Director of Student Services, has some more to share.
Thank you, Dr. Kind. So when it comes to reviewing the data that was just shared in relation to our students on IEPs, sometimes it doesn't tell the full story. And so we need to be diving in a little bit deeper and looking at outcomes for our students and whether or not they're fully represented in the data that was previously shared. And so one way that we do that is looking at progress reports. We are required to share student progress 3 times per year in writing. And that progress ranks students as either meeting their goals, making progress towards their goals, or their goals the progress is not on track. And so we pull that data at the end of each trimester and do kind of a snapshot of where are we at. When we did that at the end of this last MARC reporting period, it was clear that we were slightly below where we were at this time last year, but in that same range. So 86% of the goals that we have data on for this tri are students that are making progress or meeting their goals. Goals are written to be met within 1 year's time. And so we are looking for that 88 to 90% range, and we'll continue making changes and striving towards that. Another data point that seems unrelated, but actually isn't, is the number of evaluations that we are bypassing. We believe that when students are in front of educators, they are benefiting. And the more time that our educators can spend providing that direct instruction versus completing due process or other types of paperwork is going to result in benefit to our students. So we mitigate some of those due process requirements whenever possible. We are allowed through the state of Minnesota to bypass evaluations. They used to be required every 3 years. Now at that 3-year mark, a team can determine if the evaluation is in the best interest of the student. That team includes the parent. They provide input on that as well. And when it's not in the best interest of the student, we bypass and use other data sources, saving the team a lot of time that would have been spent on paperwork. This year we bypassed about 7.2% of evaluations that were due, which is roughly, and I kid you not, 279. So, I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, I could have pulled data again today and it might have been 280, but that wouldn't have been as cool. So, but that is a good number for us. That is a nice target range for us. If we were exceeding, 10%, that would be, we'd have some questions about, well, are we really truly evaluating as many students as we should? If we were at a number less than 4%, we would be questioning, are we utilizing this opportunity? So, falling in a nice range there.
Strategic Direction B, Goal 2, relates to pathways for college and career readiness to unleash student agency. And this relates to our accelerated coursework 12 by 12 enrollment so that it mirrors our district demographics. Again, this is the snapshot of the district operational plan with the strategies and the process and outcome measures. And so I'm just going to jump right into the College and Career Readiness Index. This is formerly the Achievement Index. It consists of 4 measures. The first measure is to students are earning at least 1 semester or trimester credit in a post-secondary college course, a concurrent or articulated course, an AP, IB, or HP course, saw a 7% increase from last year. So our numbers are up in that area. Professional certifications increased by 1% overall. Internships, apprenticeships increased by 4%. And we experienced a 1% decrease in the bilingual CL earning. This graph shows the College and Career Readiness Index by race, and we can see an increase in students earning these credits or certificates increased across the board. Our goal was 80% in each group, and we fell short in each group as well. This graph shows the College and Career Readiness Index by service group. All groups saw increases, including students receiving special education services, where we saw a 25% increase in students receiving one of the 4 things in the previous measure. And lastly, the 12 by 12 is the measure which shows students who are on track to earn 12 credits that could lead to college credit by the time they graduate from high school. At the end of 9th grade, they should receive 3, 6 by the end of 10th grade, 9 at the end of 11th grade, and 12 by the end of 12th grade. We see, again, this is broken down by race. We see significant gains in each of our student groups. This graph breaks down the same data by service group and gender. Each group and gender saw increases in the 12 by 12 earning. While the rest of the data for the entire presentation was about 25-26 school year, our graduation data is about the class of 2025. So even though we celebrated graduation on Sunday, we're still looking at the class of 2025's graduation. As of 2025, Asian, Black, White, and multiracial students had achieved the 80% benchmark. Each of these groups improved over the last year or remained above 90%. However, graduation and continuation rates for our American Indian and Hispanic students have been below the benchmark for most of the past 5 years. And with that, Dr. Bass.
All right, thank you. So this is our time to pause and process for Strategic Direction B. And so there are several questions here. I think when we think about, we've received feedback from the board before about trying to not have the data be so wide and so broad that we don't get to have a deeper conversation. So we've tried to narrow it to give you some transparency around some of the different aspects of a culture of achievement, the acceleration opportunity, the our literacy trend data, and our graduation rates. And so that question under alignment check, given the amount of data that we've shared, do you have suggestions? Should we narrow this even further? Did we get it about right? Should we expand a little bit and go back out and get a few more pieces of data? So I think that's something that we want to really be responsive to as you've asked for that narrowing. Did we hit it or is it too narrow? So is 5 to 7 minutes okay to have some time to have some conversation around that question? Okay.
Could I ask one question about the, when we were talking about the aggressive growth and that sort of thing, is that, because when you get to higher levels for like a second grader, if they probably don't see much progress by the end of the year, correct? Because they're already so high up, there's not much space.
Since the test is computer adapted, they would start getting 3rd or 4th grade questions.
So that has changed. Okay.
There is opportunity for them to continue to have aggressive growth.
Thank you. That was it.
All right, how's that the time?
Should we stand up, Mr. Charles? Either way. I'm gonna stand here.
Yeah, this is, it's hard to focus on the question about the data when it's the results are.
Yeah.
I think just focusing on the right data.
the results you want. We caught it, you catch it, and you understand.
It's definitely the right data.
Mhm.
It's just not the results that we want.
Yeah.
Seeing the, like kind of fall to winter.
Mhm.
Action is taken differently. At the point of this data, winter. Actually, what took place, if any.
One of the questions I had is if we have a way to measure learning loss from spring to fall. Like,
Seems
are we
like it'll
starting
be
from
the
ground
farmer
zero every
question,
time?
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a great question to ask.
I felt like, so they kept saying that a big cause of it was Operation Metro Surge, but the data was very similar last year.
You know, he's
And it
curious
wasn't
what-
great in the prior year, so it kind of felt like that was an excuse that
Do you think, yeah, and I am curious if there's, like, that is understandable.
like a valid point,
Yeah.
but the data was similar in years prior, so. I don't know, I guess I feel like they need to do some more digging
What's interesting to me,
to figure out what happened there.
that's what I'm questioning.
Showed it, but given what we saw earlier in the year, they showed us the signal and they showed us like what happened. Time invested in
I think one of the items I would even just say is, given the amount of data shared, so for narrowing the scope, even saying just be adaptable, and if you see areas to look into further, come with more data. It doesn't have to be an exact answer, but if there's something that they see as a trend, bring it, like, it's an interest.
Once you retire, that was our savings. So like my previous district, the superintendent
The
retired.
College and Career Readiness Index, I like it. I guess my question is, do students know about it? Like, do they know that we're trying to check off these different boxes, and is there a way that we can motivate them to participate?
That's a good question.
I know this is kind of a newer initiative for us, but
Well, and if it's expansion of the high quality or high value pathways, so participation mirrors district demographics, is that, so are we ensuring that the availability at all of our schools too, is that reflected in the data? Questions around that, I guess is what I would have. Because this is more about the pathway, and these are more about the results, like the percentage of kids that get it versus do we have enough in place
yeah.
for
And
them to
then,
access it?
are those all of the right pathways? So like if a student starts a business or a nonprofit, should that count?
That's a good point, at the mock interviews, like, it's amazing some of the things that the kids are doing, like.
Seriously.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be curious about that. I think it wouldn't be negative information. I think it'd be really positive.
Mhm.
I think it would just be valuable to have it captured.
And we're back.
Okay. All right. So I guess I'll start, but both of you jump in at any point. We felt like, for the most part, the data was spot on. I think one of the things that would be nice in the future is to have some additional context, to actually have some research done on why, the reasons for the results. So for example, it was mentioned that Operation Metro Surge was a reason for a dip in the A-rating scores, but the scores were very similar in the prior year and have been low for quite some time. So like, what are the reasons for why haven't we met our goals in those areas? And so I think just a little more information in the future would be helpful there, versus kind of anecdotal information that doesn't add up. Sorry, I'm jumping around. So right now I'm at the College and Career Readiness Index. I think we were wondering if there is more information that needs to go into the index. So, like, are these the right boxes that we should be checking off for students? Are students even aware that we're trying to meet these goals for each of these areas? Are there other measures that would be helpful? So maybe instead of PSEO, AP, IB, professional certifications, if students are working or starting businesses, nonprofits, all the crazy things that our students are doing now, how can we measure that in the same index? What else? Working my way back. Do you all want to add more on the A reading aggressive growth scores?
Yeah, well, I guess like this is more like a question. We were curious about, we like that it's fall to winter, and then we see the fall to spring. That's really helpful, good information. We were just curious, like, were different actions taken when we saw like the growth maybe wasn't where we wanted it to be from fall to winter? Did anything change between winter and spring to try to achieve a different trajectory?
So I think one of the big challenges is that the people who would have supported the changes were teaching in temporary online learning. So how do we find that balance? And we know that the stress that put on buildings as well. And so there's small actions taken, yes. We didn't have any professional learning during that time. So
that connects the dots for Metro Surge explanation too, in some ways.
Is spring or like winter spring a traditional time where there is learning loss as Minnesotans? Like culturally, is that something that happens?
From winter
in our
to
area?
spring?
No. Winter to spring. It typically
goes up.
Okay.
Our typical learning decrease in learning is fall to winter.
I understand.
So that winter screening, because it's January right after break, is when we do our screening.
Yeah.
And so, a lot can happen for students over the break.
Interesting. Okay. Was it a similar decrease to previous years?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I can find out.
Yeah, I'd be curious about that. Just trying to suss out if there's other factors that impact the students, and Minnesota is unique, and so how do we factor that into what we're looking at? And so my only comment on the amount of data shared and Habanera, I thought it was really good field of data, and it's more like something about that, like having flexibility and I appreciated that you gave us the info on ICE and the Metro Surge and how the supports weren't available. Just having information like that is super helpful, and understanding, because I don't understand how it always translates for the classroom, and so just having that translation is really helpful. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we think the data was right, and maybe there's times we're in depending on the data, it's like follow the data when we need more or less, right? So we leave that flexibility and judgment to you guys. I like that the family stakeholder survey showed like good conditions for learning. It's just for us, it was hard to focus on, are these the right measures, when it's like the measures themselves were not what we want them to be. It was really and because earlier in the year we saw all of the examples of what the curriculum looked like, what was being in place, like the blocks and the time and the hours. I know Director Dawson had sent us some questions too to add into the discussion, and just what can we do differently? Like from we'll have the funding discussion and the budget discussion, but what's working or not working here? Like we saw that the dip, yes, there's a dip, but we were pretty shocked that it's not where we wanted it to be or expected to be, given all that we saw going into it.
So just from the Department of Learning and Achievement, we would agree, we were horrified, I think is the word that came out when we first looked at it on my birthday, in fact. It was a great birthday present. But I think, when we dug into the data a little bit deeper and we see the classrooms where we have growth, we know what's working there.
Okay.
And that led to some of the actions that we developed that you saw on the slides. We know that in classrooms where we saw lots of growth, it is following the curriculum and the pacing guide. It is using that 30 minute of extra literacy, so there's 120 minutes and 30s phonics, 60s CKLA, and there's 30 for differentiating time. It's using that differentiation time really intentionally. Where we saw the highest increase in 5th grade and 2nd grade, the school reorganized the classrooms to say, okay, Dr. Walker, he's really excelling, he's going to go here for enrichment. Right, so thinking about those things and sharing those, and again, going back to having opportunities for principals to talk with each other and share those stories, we see that, we know that works, and now it's just about talking about it more and not ignoring the dip.
Yeah. Well, and that was a question I had thinking about during the presentation was, do we have one classroom with kids all over the place of growth, or are we thinking about how best to organize the classes so that we have maybe kids in similar growth areas to really kind of focus?
Yeah. So we still use the whole school cluster model where we look at students' growth and then they're clustered into different groups based off of their growth data. So we don't have someone who has the highest growth with someone necessarily who has no growth. So we've done that and have principals do that.
Yeah, we'll be taking a deep, I spoke to you a little bit about it already, a deep dive into where the barriers are occurring at, and just talking with the team, it could almost be foundational. It could be how are the PLTs, professional learning teams, being used, because normally you don't have to break your classroom down by that if you got the appropriate, and I'm not saying it's not occurring, by the way, but getting a little bit deeper into data, how are PLTs working. Then of course, academics is not just academics, it's academics and student management. So how do those two play a part? So our goal is we'll be going very deep into where those barriers are happening at and why things are not occurring. So
Yeah, and I liked what you said earlier about like putting the whole system together, thinking about the academic and the social emotional. Like that sounds like a game changer.
So I had a question about why was student data not part of the culture of achievement and how they're perceiving it?
So since the student survey is under construction, we just focused on those key metrics, and I think as we revise that and develop the questions, that could be one of the scales we'll bring that back. Yeah.
And for. Oh, and going back to the data around that, it'd be interesting how, and I'm sure you're already looking at it, but being a data nerd a little bit, how it looks across the district and, in the different classrooms. So I'm just curious how that's all impacted. I'm sure you are too.
She's looking at me because she just gave me a big 3 ring, but I asked the same question.
But yeah, I think great questions for sure. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes.
Oh, I am sorry. I didn't bring up my college and career readiness questions. My only comment here was, do we measure, we measure the outcome, so we're measuring how many kids are participating and getting those certificates. Do we have a way to measure how well our schools are doing in providing and probably marketing to our students as well, so that there's awareness of the pathways, and then just ensuring that each school has the best pathways for their students?
I did love when I went to the I think it was the high school, high school orientation maybe. And they had like the booklet, and it's for the whole district.
Yes.
So you can so you can see across, and now the consistency that we're bringing and the access across the district. That was
So
awesome.
seen right now.
That was great. I noticed that. Yeah.
I'll just ask you, that's like one of the pieces that when we're marketing, we do try to pull out a lot. So we'll continue to do that because it is one of the things, and it's an advantage of coming in and enrolling here. So
We have that.
making sure people know about it.
Totally, 100% agree with that. I have no more extra questions.
Thank you all so much for your feedback.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Morstead, we're gonna go in and we're gonna have a review of the 2026-27 budget. Oh, John, bring up your team, come on.
I know, I told them.
Come on, team.
We're on a time pressure.
We will go fast.
Here you go. Let me have a slide like this. Slide.
No, he was like,
Oh, my.
You want to grab those? Just because I saw that.
I guess so. I thought you said, is the other one or there was Mark? Should we give him?
All right. Kelly, what's your best?
Not fun.
Want me to wait?
Ready?
Okay. We already gave this to Kim, but just tonight, we're going to be talking about the recommendation for the school board to adopt the proposed 2027 budget for all funds. The proposed budget reflects the board's prior direction, key budget decisions key budget decisions made throughout the year and the adjustments approved earlier in the spring. The general fund is projected to end fiscal 27 with a fund balance of 23.7% of expenditures, or about 12.3 weeks of operations. So just over 3 months we can run. If for some reason state, federal, and everyone cut off all funding, we can last about 3 months. That level remains above the district's 5% fund balance policy and continues to reflect the transition from a stable to what we would call a watchful overall financial position. As Kelly Benusa, Director of Business Services, walks through the budget this evening, she will highlight the major assumptions, the key changes for both of the prior year and our February projections, and implications of the 5-year financial forecast. So we'll introduce Kelly.
Thanks, Sean. Good evening. Before I begin, I want to thank the Business Services leadership team and our budget managers across the district for all of their work in preparing those materials that we're going to be looking at tonight. So in your materials tonight, we have 2 budget documents. The first is item 2, the budget summary and 5-year financial projections by fund. That's the document we're going to be focusing on this evening. The second is item 3, and that's your fiscal year 27 annual budget. So we're not going to review that document tonight. It's included and will be posted to the district's website after board approval on June 23rd. So that annual budget is organized into 5 sections. There's the introductory, organizational, financial, informational, and then our benchmark comparison. So together, those sections provide a full budget picture. And tonight, though, our focus is the budget summary and the 5-year projections by fund. So like prior years, this budget was developed in a challenging financial and funding environment. And the fiscal year 27 budget reflects that reality. With that, let's turn to item 2, the budget summary and 5-year financial projections by fund, and begin with the fiscal year 27 budget memo to the board, and that's on page 125 of your packet. So the timeline shows the fiscal year 27 budget planning process. It's designed to give the board multiple opportunities to provide direction or take action, as John just mentioned. Moving on to page 126 of your packet, and page 2 of that memo, the proposed fiscal year 27 general fund budget includes revenue of $349.6 million and expenditures of $367.8 million. That results in an anticipated operating deficit of $18.2 million and a projected year-end fund balance of $87.2 million. Comparing that with our 26 revised budget, revenue is increasing 6.8% and expenditures are increasing 6.9%. At the same time, the projected year-end fund balance declines from 30.6% to 23.7%. While this is a planned use of fund balance, the district remains above policy minimums and within a range that supports operational stability. Overall, the budget reflects a deliberate balance between meeting current needs, investing in strategic priorities, and maintaining appropriate financial reserves. So below that table are the major 27 expenditure adjustments. So we have several major expenditure adjustments that are reflected in this 27 proposed budget. The board approved adjustments from February 24th, total a net increase of $2.25 million. And they included the enrollment alignment, the additional custodial staffing for increased high school square footage, revenue-related reductions for student support personnel aid, and school library aid. The Minnesota paid leave, payroll tax, and remaining operating capacity for Aspen Ridge Elementary. In addition, the board approved the one-year strategic investment in special education staffing, totaling $2.75 million. While that investment increases fiscal year 27 expenditures, it is expected to generate partial revenue in fiscal years 28. The budget also includes the delayed Crestview rebuild startup costs that shifted from fiscal year 26 into fiscal year 27. The planned elimination of the compensatory maximum hold harmless, and then savings from our fiscal year 26 major revision. So now we're moving on to page 127 or page 3 of that memo. So taken together, these factors contribute to expenditure growth of 6.9%, which is above the district's 3% expenditure plan target. That higher growth is primarily being driven by strategic investments, compensation and benefit changes, transportation and utility increases, and timing shifts between fiscal years. So I'm going to turn it back to John for a few comments.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the district is really hitting a crossroads. For the first time in our budget history, we spend more than $1 million a day on just the basic general fund, not including any grants, any of those pieces. Well, like compensatories, we consider a grant. But we spend over $1 million a day to operate the district. And while we've had to make some very specific strategic approaches and to address specific needs in the recent future, and those are included in the financial projections, we're really going to be needing to ask the board to provide some guidance and thoughtful decision-making on what the future looks like. So we're going to present here shortly a couple of different, call them general direction options for consideration. And really, that's really what we're looking for is the district's going to need direction on where the board wants us to go, and then obviously we'll present options to you to make decisions. So it's thinking about that as we move forward, because we have moved into fiscal 26 was the first year of us deficit spending, and that now is our foreseeable future. And so we have to decide how we want to address that.
So you're providing information tonight, and you're not asking the board to make any decisions, because not all board members are here. Okay.
This is just information.
Okay.
The fiscal year 27 budget reflects a deliberate, multi-step planning process over the past year. Throughout that process, the school board has had multiple opportunities to provide direction, review assumptions, and approve key adjustments. The budget before you tonight is the direct result of those decisions and the cumulative outcome of that work. As part of that process, assumptions related to both revenues and expenditures have been refined to reflect current legislation, cost trends, and updated information. While revenue growth continues to be constrained by factors such as formula limitations and levy capacity, expenditure pressures, particularly in areas such as compensation, which has a compounding impact since most of our costs are in the staff area, transportation costs and utility inflationary increases continue to exceed our long-term trend targets. So looking ahead, the 5-year financial projection is a planning tool that helps show the impact of those assumptions over time. It highlights increasing tension between program needs and long-term financial stability, as expenditures are expected to continue to outpace those recurring revenues, as John just mentioned. As a result, future decisions will require thoughtful consideration of both immediate student and program needs and the long-term sustainability of the district's financial position. Maintaining that balance will require continued monitoring, refinement of assumptions, and over time, consideration of operational adjustments to ensure the district remains aligned with its fund balance policy and preserves its long-term financial stability and flexibility. So continuing on that page 3 of that memo, compared with the February 24th, 26 projections, the fiscal year adopted budget reflects now a more detailed line item based development process rather than that broader percentage assumption used earlier in the year. Revenue is now projected to be higher by approximately $5.1 million, while expenditures are higher by approximately $9.3 million. As a result, the projected year-end fund balance is about $2.3 million lower than estimated in February. It's important to frame these differences as refinements in assumptions and calculations, not as changes in the district's overall fiscal direction. As the budget moves from forecasted detailed development, these updates are expected and provide a more accurate picture of the district's financial outlook. So moving to page 128 and 129 of the packet, and then page 4 and 5 of the memo. The updated budget is driven by several important revenue and expenditure changes. On the revenue side, the most significant increases come from special education revenue, including additional federal tuition adjustment, desegregation transportation revenue, abatement revenue, general education aid, third-party medical billing, operating referendum revenue, and English learner revenue. These gains are partially offset by lower projected interest income. On the expenditure side, the largest pressures include in salaries, the one-year special education, staffing investment, staffing contract settlements, and in benefits, increases in medical insurance and HSA costs, in purchase services, higher transportation contract costs, utility increases, tuition adjustments, and other detailed line item refinements that became clear during budget development. In some cases, expenditures, such as in salaries, were also shifted from funding sources to maximize allowable revenue, as was the case with special education expenditures shifted from federal grants as part of the federal tuition adjustment component to the revenue formula that was then detailed out in this memo. So that reflects a strategic approach to our funding alignment and helps strengthen our overall financial picture where state and federal rules permit. So we're trying whatever we can to maximize our revenues. And with that, I'm going to move to page 131 of your packets for the first 5-year financial projection by fund. So starting with the fiscal year 28 5-year financial projection for the general fund, this projection is a high-level visual summary of the financial forecast with supporting detail provided on the following pages. This gives you multiple ways to review that information. There are 3 sections to this projection, and that same structure is used for all of the funds presented tonight. However, the assumptions and parameters for each of those funds is different. The 5-year projection provides important context for the district's financial planning beyond fiscal year 27. In the general fund, the forecast shows continued pressure on fund balance over time. Even with the planned operational adjustments starting in fiscal year 28, the projected fund balance declines to 5.2% by fiscal year 2031. Currently, we're planning for operational reductions of $2 million in 28, $3 million in 29, $5 million in 2030, and then $6 million in 2031. And those reductions right now total $16 million. So that trend highlights the need for ongoing monitoring and future decisions around expenditure reductions or revenue opportunities, or both, to preserve that long-term flexibility. We may need to consider other options to create future financial stability, which John's going to speak to after we review all the funds tonight. And with that, I'll hand it back to John to go over the food nutrition fund.
The part of Jeff Answard's will be played by me because he had a conflict this evening, so I will jump in and go over food service really quickly. The general fund for food service generates its own revenue and pays for its own expenditures, completely separate of the district's general fund. The only time those would merge together. It was if food service was in a deficit and the general fund was required to step in and help cover. Revenue sources here come from breakfast, lunch, after-school snacks, a la carte sales, and summer programming. Revenue is projected to outpace expenditures for the next 3 years, and in 2030 and 31 expenditure projections would show them slightly outpacing revenue in the out years. At the beginning of the 25-26 school year, we were trending to a 10% increase in breakfast and a 6% increase in lunch over the prior year's participation. At about that time, the metro surge occurred, and we saw a significant turn in reduction in the participation of over versus prior year's numbers from December through about March. And in April, we went flat, and May started to see a little increase again. The fund balance has been consistently healthy in the past, and projections show it will continue in the foreseeable future. In 2025, fund balance was increased by just shy of $700,000. The fund does operate under USDA rule, that allows a maximum of 3 months of average expenditures on hand in fund balance. We today exceed that 3-month amount. However, there is a waiver in place again for the 26-27 school year that allows 6 months because of either changes coming out of COVID or with the free meals plan, and they're seeing school districts are pretty consistently seeing an increase in fund balance across the state. Over the past few years, we've focused on increasing our capital expenditures to be intentional and spend down that fund balance by reinvesting in our district's kitchens and frontline staff. For example, this summer we are ripping out and removing the Osseo Senior High dish room and office space and upgrading it to make it more user-friendly, as well as bringing in a state-of-the-art ware washing equipment for about $550,000. We continue to focus on improving our kitchen facilities and bringing outdated equipment up to date in the years to come. Any questions on the food service fund? I'll hand it to Brian Severson Hall to talk about community ed.
Okay, thanks, John. So I'll go over the Fund 4, Community Service Fund, and similar to Food Nutrition Services, we're a self-funding fund area. And I know this has 25 through 31, but kind of by era, just without going too far back, in 2020, we fell off the cliff on revenue from 19 million to 11 million. And then from 21 to 24, we had kind of this rapid back in action where we jumped up. If you count our 1.7 million in grant state aid that doesn't show up on here, we made it all the way back up to 20 million in revenue. So we had a 3-year window where we grew 10 million in revenue. And as you can see, now that we're back to this chart, you can see we're in the middle of a 25, 26, 27 where our expenditures have been outpacing our revenue. We foreshadowed that and talked about that a little bit last year. And then you can see we're planning for 28 through 31 to get a stabilization where you pretty much have flat revenue and expenditures with some operational adjustments in there. So we're kind of in this 3 different segments that we've had in these 3-4 year segments. Our goal, you can see when you start on the upper left, this expenditures outpacing revenue is significant to the point where our fund balance goes from 23% to 5%. So it's a significant decline in our fund balance. I typically try to have our fund balance between 7 and 15%. I've shared it with this board before. I don't like it to go below 7% because we're self-funding and we want to be able to have dollars in there to do creative programming. And I don't like it to go over 15% because 70% of our revenue is participation fees. So in my opinion, if we get much higher than that, we're probably charging people too much, right? So I want the programs to be reasonably priced. But you can see, as I already mentioned, 2028 will begin some larger operational adjustments, but that will prevent us from going into a negative fund balance where we might need to make a request from Fund 1 to cover our negative fund balance, but it'll also get us to that 7% threshold that I prefer. And as is typical in community ed, we adjust as we go along, both by adding and subtracting based on participation, right? So even this upcoming year, we have additional revenue and expenditures that we're expecting because we're bringing community ed programs to Aspen Ridge, and we're also going back online with community ed programs at Fernbrook that we took away because of school capacity for the last 2 years. So even while we're doing this work, there's still some variation in our programming, and there are already some adjustments that start on July 1st of this year that are reflected in this budget. Kari was here earlier. We've cut 3 FTEs out of her program already starting on July 1st. Our budget doesn't always line up exactly the same year that the school has. Sometimes we've had years where the school has been, Fund 1 has been making cuts and we've been doing really well. And in this case, we just happen to be a little bit ahead of the curve of where the Fund 1 is, and we're making our adjustments now. So we've done some of those already for this upcoming year, as well as some increases in fees for some of our programs to have the revenue catch up. So we've already done some of those adjustments. And yeah, cut spending, we always adjust it mid-year. Mike's here, and some fee increases. Did I miss anything, Mike?
Yep.
Yep. And I did inform the school board through Dr. Heil about some of the adjustments we made in our ABE program. With that doesn't show up on here all the time because that's technically, we consider that a grant money, even though we tend to get it from year to year. And that's about $1.7 million. But our expenditures in ABE have been outpacing our revenue, and because of it, of the way it's funded, that gets covered by community ed fund balance. And as you can see, we can't do that, right? It's not going to work. So those are roller coaster is the wrong word, but a little more variation in this little 6-year period that we're currently in than we've had in recent years, but going to be stabilized pretty quickly. Did I get everything, Mike? Yeah. And thanks to Mike. Mike helps our team out a lot, so appreciate him.
We'll move on to the last fund. So on page 138 of your packet, in the capital fund, the fiscal year 27 position remains above that 10% minimum. But future years are going to rely on operational adjustments and levy-related planning to sustain fund balance and support our ongoing capital priorities. Included in the projection is the payoff of the Aspen Ridge Special Assessment of $3.5 million. This creates a significant constraint on available expenditures over the next several years. So John and I are exploring other potential options to help alleviate that pressure, such as including those costs in a future bond sale. This makes the capital fund another area where long-range financial planning remains important. Overall, the fiscal year 27 budgets both immediate operational realities and longer-range financial planning. The district continues to balance both our student needs, strategic investments, and then sound financial stewardship. The fund balance remains an important planning tool because it gives the district flexibility to manage variability, respond to changing needs, and phase in adjustments over time. At the same time, the 5-year forecast makes clear that continued monitoring and future operational decisions will be necessary, particularly in the general, community service, and capital funds. The actions already taken by the board have positioned the district to adopt a budget that is manageable in the near term, while also identifying the pressure points that will need to be addressed in future budget cycles. So in closing, we'll recommend that the school board approve the fiscal year 27 budget for all funds at the June 23rd board meeting. The budget reflects the district's current operational needs, the strategic investments approved by the board, and a continued commitment to financial stability. So following that adoption, our next major steps will be preparing for the fiscal year 26 audit in July and returning to the board in November for acceptance of the fiscal year 26 audit results. And with that, I'll turn it back to John.
Thanks, Kelly. So the last thing I want to really talk about and kind of touch on what I mentioned before are, I think Brian really kind of walked us in the door just a little bit because, how you described, you're a step ahead of us. I think is fair. It's, the district's at a situation where we just need to start thinking about options for the future. We're not in a rush, as Kelly stated. Our finances are stable today. We are in a good spot. But we need to start planning mindfully. Where our district has a great habit of really giving ourselves a long runway so we can really take in lots of different variables and perspectives to make a good decision. And I think that's really where we want to say, just as a heads up, the budget as a whole now kind of needs that lens. And what I just showed here is just two very simple, just call them rough directions. So option one is the direction we're on today, which is in order to meet board policy, we're simply going to recommend operational adjustments to stay in line for that 5%. So what you're looking at here is the 5-year projection, but it's just the last 3 years. And the reason I picked the last 3 years is there's a kind of you look right in the middle, the three numbers almost match exactly. They're $17.5 million. That's today, we bring in $17.5 million less than we spend on average every single year. That is a long-term concern we have to figure out how to address. The question of how is, well, we just need to dig in and, like I said, get the lens and take a look at it. That's option two. Is option one, we just keep going along. We essentially are going to cover the cost of our inflation. Eventually, in fiscal 2033, we'll be in statutory operating debt if we follow that path. But that's in about 6 years. So other than that, option two would say, let's look at doing something to reduce that 17.5 million year over year that's sitting out there. So it's, again, not direction, simply a heads up so that in the future you're aware that's that tension that Kelly kind of mentioned that's there, that we're going to have to see. Now, I know those numbers look really daunting too, and I want to point out that when we say we need to reduce or make an operational adjustment of $2 million, that's less than 0.5% of our budget.
Yeah, it's 4.5% total.
I mean, that's 2 days. Like I said, that's 2 days.
We got it.
We can do that super
Very.
So this is not while the numbers look big, this is achievable. We can make this happen. It's just working together as a team and collaborating like we do so well in all categories, we can solve this. But it's just, it's out there. And the other reason why we're looking at 29, 30, 31 is we have time to look at. We're not in a panic. We're not in a rush. We have time to just take a look and do this right. And so I'm excited for the opportunity that will present to us going forward, because I think it will just make the district stronger. So with that, we'll turn it back to you for questions.
Yeah, so I guess just picking up where you left off, and then you all jump in. Can you tell what's the process right now, maybe behind the scenes with staff, to start having those conversations about possible recommendations?
We actually started looking this in August, so you want to talk about the...
Yeah, so we've, even with the budget cycle or the long-range financial planning process that we got to help us get to today, we introduced a concept called GLIDE that's intended to say, essentially, everybody take a look internally at what you're spending on, and see, does it fit into one of these categories? And some of the examples are, can you be more efficient? Can you create more revenue? Is there that low-hanging fruit? And I always go back to the same thing of, food is a very obvious one for us. We spend a little bit of money on food in our district, and even a slight adjustment to say, you know what, I'm going to make sure there's something for this meal, but we don't have to have enough left over to feed 25 people when we're done. That's planful. That's just saying, okay, we're going to make sure that that's a little bit more aligned and we save some money. We're constantly looking at those, all departments are at the continuous improvement. What can we do to do this a little bit better? You've seen in here, there are some operational adjustments that DLTL made to make some changes to some of their staffing around assessments and relating that's going to make them function a lot more efficiently and save some money.
Significant cut, yeah.
So that's a great example. We've made some of those changes on the operations side as well, where we're saying, hey, how we're operating today has changed a little. We have a position that we may or may not need, or we can make some adjustments to change that and save some money. So a lot of them are very little corrections, but it starts with teaching everyone, here's what you can potentially look at, and it doesn't mean go to cut immediately. There's 4 or 5 different ways you can address each area. It becomes what's best for your department. And what's best to say is that program critical, that we've got to figure out a way to keep it? Is it, again, you kind of have to rank them. So we kind of start the evaluation process.
And most people, automatically jump and think it's something that's impacting their class. We're nowhere.
Mm.
Nowhere.
Yeah.
I want to put that on the record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's huge.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the question that I think is being asked in every organization when we're talking about efficiency and continuous improvement. Are you all also talking about how we might leverage AI to achieve some of those goals?
I mean, I know we
I don't know,
are
we
on
haven't
an
gotten there on
individual
that
basis.
one.
I don't think we are, like, strategically as a district saying we have to implement AI everywhere. I don't want to step on anything. Anthony, tell me if I'm wrong. But like, I know one of the examples I'd give you is we're looking at a system that leverages AI to help manage all of our security processes better. To be more effective, it's cost efficient, it brings down the amount of, we spend right now for 3 or 4 different components, we can compile into one, and it's utilizing AI, so we're just getting so much more out of one single component. So we're gonna test that this next year. And again, just trying to be mindful that might be a direction to go. Are there things we can do? Yeah, I think we're at the tip of the iceberg of figuring out where those fit.
Once again, saying it out loud on recording, nothing regarding teachers.
Yeah, I don't think you can AI teachers.
No.
I would officially like to be on record saying.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I'm like, we're putting it out there.
I would remember other districts that have made more severe cuts. The fact of the matter is we're a people organization and people costs cannot outpace what the state is funding us at. That's the fundamental root cause is state funding. And it falls on the districts and we're a people organization. So I do recognize, I think the because the 17 million is 4.5%. Completely achievable. Like that doesn't scare me at all. And it sounds like with Glide, it comes back to what's the strategic framework, and I think that's where we want to be involved in is working with management to establish the strategic framework. And I also think this is the right time to marry up the educational ROI with the financial ROI, given the student outcomes we're seeing. We can't go down both directions financially and student outcomes. And understanding how our budget reserve plays into that, like we still have to be flexible enough to say where do we need to make investments or repurpose dollars. I think this is the time to really tear open how we budget and how we look at the outcomes and the investments that we're making and build that into the culture, like you're saying. This is the time to completely transform this conversation about finances and outcomes together.
Yeah, thank you. So we started in August, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary to deficit spend for sure. But it's understandable too, seeing where our fund balance was at. It was at 38.4 in 25, so it's much higher than we needed. So it's kind of right sizing based on what I'm hearing. So it's not necessarily super scary. But as a non-finance person, can I ask a silly question? So the operational adjustments, 2 million, and then we also have the fund projection. So is that the 2 million plus the deficit out of the fund? So what we're taking out of the fund along with an adjustment of 2 million?
So when you're looking at that $2 million adjustment, that rolls into the next year.
Okay.
So we're saying in order for us at the very last year to hit 5.5%, we started with 16 million or so, and then we said, okay, you could sit and wait and put 16 million on the very last year, or it might even be, is it more than that when you do that? The number goes up significantly because 2 million in the first year is then 4, then 6, then 8, so you're saving. So we just kind of gently spread it to say what's the minimum, and ultimately that's the minimum that we run into. So, and when you really look at it, we're essentially covering the inflationary increase above 3% that gets us from year to year.
Okay, because it's that, like in, where am I looking, 27, the big jump from, so we go 23, 19, 14, 9, so we're doing a gentle slope in there, and I appreciate that. It just, yeah, I'm just curious about more of this, and I know it's the beginning of the journey, so just wondering how that will shape out. And obviously teaching and classrooms are the priority for sure. And I appreciate that in your leadership and how you've expressed that even in how we've handled contracts and stuff, so.
And I think even over the past 3 years with the 3 Cs and with the how do we take weight off the system, how are we cognizant of where we have redundancy or kind of little pockets of things that maybe isn't achieving the outcome that we're intending and it's been around for a long time. So, I mean, I think this is a huge opportunity. I think viewing it as an opportunity is definitely the right way to think about this work effort.
I am thankful we're not in the position of other districts for sure, so. I obviously don't want to have deficits, but I appreciate that you guys have been so financially responsible and we are where we are. Like, it's not abysmal.
And it's not a surprise, like you said.
Yeah.
We've been seeing this coming, seeing it coming, knowing all of the activities. So it, in no way, shape, or form is this a surprise. It's just, to your point, now is the time we have to do things different and pull different levers going forward. And I do want to mention Director Dawson kind of had sent in some questions, and I think we've covered most of them, but she also mentioned kind of really needing to link those outcomes and the finances. They have to go together in a new way of how we think about this.
You mentioned that you were looking for guidance from us. Like, what would that look like?
Well, today it's just start thinking about it. I mean, I think we don't know the answer to that yet. So I think that's we need to take some time and put some strategy around how do we want to, as a cabinet team and under Dr. Heil's direction, say how do we want to start approaching this and where do we make sure the board is involved in that?
Yeah, it sounds
It's
like
more of
a
a heads up than anything.
I do think, so you mentioned that this isn't a surprise, and no, it's not a surprise to us that we're starting these conversations, but this may be a surprise to the community.
Yes.
And so I think a priority for me is making sure that we have some sort of timeline identified in advance for these discussions and that we are thinking about how we bring the community along in this process as well. So they're not surprised at the $17 million in cuts at the end of the day.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and I think we built the framework because we just did boundary changes and all those things as
Yeah.
an example to say, that works fantastically. I don't know if that's a word or not. But it's just a great framework to show you how tying all those things together and bringing people in and saying, we need your feedback too, what's important to you, what's not. That's the nice thing about the time we have, where we're not in a rush. And you guys have been in a difficult spot the last couple of years and had to make some hard decisions, some good decisions, right? And it's okay that we had fund balance and it's okay to spend that. It's just knowing how do we keep it on the right side long term. So again, you have the flexibility, so when that weird curveball comes up, you still have the flexibility to do something. And I think that's kind of the financial goal we're always looking to, is how do we maintain flexibility for the board so they can make a tough decision when they have to. That's really the heart of it.
I think from a board direction standpoint, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our guidance and direction would be we want to be involved, and we want to be involved in the strategic framework, and we want to see something that begins to evolve the budgeting process and the financial process to be tied to student outcomes and start talking student ROI. We have a lot of rich information in the report that does have a lot of that, how much we spend on instruction and so forth, and how much we're spending in curriculum implementations. Like, we want to be able to put the dollars where it's going to have the biggest impact to student outcomes, and that's the type of information that we're going to need going forward. So to me, that's the board direction that we want to provide at this time.
Yeah, that's really good.
Anything to add?
No.
Well said. Well, the only thing I did have a question about was the food and nutrition. What do you typically do when you're in this kind of a situation where it just is only going up?
You want to?
This is the uniqueness. I mean, we've only had free meals since basically from fiscal 24 on. So it's, I expect at some point the state's going to have to they'll either reduce what they reimburse us. They'll bring that down a little because they'll see it as a revenue source, and then go, we can lower our own expenses, do our own version of Glide, because right now, frankly, we're making money off this program. And it's not just us, statewide, all school districts are making money on their food service program. And sooner or later, somebody's gonna ask, well, can I transfer some of that money to the general fund?
So that's what I was wondering,
Um,
yeah.
Which, there's ways to do that, but the state will jump real quick as we start to do that and go, we
Or
want that.
activity fees or like all those
Correct,
types
yeah,
of
there's
things,
lots of things. So I would expect that this will correct itself, and that'll probably come up in legislation in the next year. But what we're trying to be mindful on is those things that are big capital investments, where we don't necessarily have to tie up our capital dollars because we're allowed to use those expenses in food service, we're taking advantage. And we've been doing that for the last 3 years, so we've replaced a ton of ovens and
Great.
fridges and the big expensive things. And we're still as healthy as we see, so we're in a great spot with food service.
So our goal is probably to bring, August is already quite busy for work session, but at least by September is to start to show your draft, a parameter of what we're thinking, as well as probably by August, the beginning of the tech plan, we've been working on that as well, so.
And if we need to add a session in, between August and September, we were kind
Oh.
of chatting beforehand rather than try
Okay, that works.
to push things out or
I'd
push
be open
things
to
in.
July.
That really works.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Probably not in August, but July
Okay.
I'd be open to it.
Thank you.
And yeah, we typically take July off, but if we
Yeah.
can't, then,
Mhm.
yeah.
Perfect, thank you. That helps a lot. All right. We're gonna keep going because evidently they turned the air off in the building. So we're gonna, thank you, finance.
Thank you.
We're saving money, we turned the air off.
There's a sign
Is it on?
for the agenda.
It's
You
me.
said the lights are on, John?
The lights are still on.
okay.
The lights are still on, so the air's on? All right, we're gonna have a presentation by, on language access, and we had a beautiful one this morning. We had our professional development for our system leaders, so. Did you want to introduce Dr. Bass,
Yes,
or?
yes, yes.
I didn't mean to rush you on.
Is their team still open?
Oh, she's calling us.
Keep those, John.
And that was an AI conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Ohio, Chair Brooks, Chair Prince, members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to share about our language access plan. We did provide an update with our leaders across the system earlier today. Also included some parents in the process to really simulate some of the experiences that our multilingual families are having. So we're excited to bring a lot of work and sweat across multiple teams. You'll see once the slides come up that this is a partnership across multilingual learning, our English learner program, family and community engagement, Lisa Gill, and then communications with Kay Villela. And again, this is Kirsten Nicholson, our coordinator for English learner programs. So our presentation outcome is to learn about the district's development of a language access plan, to explore the alignment to state legislation that recently passed around this and gave us a planning year. It was more like a planning 18-month stretch. And then its alignment to our strategic direction, C, and to provide, looking for you all to provide feedback on our development and the next steps. So strategic direction C, which we got to share out in April, our highest priority there is trying to make sure that we standardize the use of our communication tools for timely, accessible, accurate information. And when we get into the plan, you'll see that this language that we established several years ago is actually language that the legislation wants to see in these plans. So it's pretty exciting that we're in alignment with legislation. So that's exciting. So that grounds us as we move into the development of the plan.
Okay, so to start off, to provide a little bit of context, good evening, it's nice to be with you. It's been a little while since I've talked to the board, so. To provide a little context about our district and what we're talking about when we're talking about language access for our community, it's important to share that we have more than 125 different languages represented within our school community. And you can see in the graphic there, it kind of shows in that image, in each like little slice of the pie, different languages that are represented, and you can see that there are some languages that have many more speakers in our district than others, but total, we have more than 125 different languages spoken, and more than 28% of our families report the use of language other than or in addition to English at home, so we would refer to that as our multilingual population. And then after English, the top 5 languages in our district are Spanish, Hmong, Vietnamese, Somali, and Ormo. So when we're talking about language access, we actually have a definition that comes from the state that is guiding this work. And so the state is providing to all school districts in Minnesota what this means. And so that's helpful. And as Dr. Bass referenced, you'll notice some connections in terms of the language that's used to what's in our strategic plan and priority C. So language access is defined as providing individuals who communicate in a language other than English with timely and reasonable access to the same information and services as English-speaking individuals. It's important to note that also in addition to language other than English, what you might think of as like English learners, also including people who may have a disability who would impact their ability to receive communication in English. So meaningful access is also further clarified for us. We have to provide assistance and access to accurate, timely, and effective communication at no cost to the individual receiving the services. And for English learners, that meaningful access means that it cannot be unreasonably restricted, delayed, or inferior compared to the access to programs or activities that are provided to English proficient individuals. So we have a lot of clarity around what this means and what we're working towards as we provide this in our community. In addition, we're reminded about the connection to language access as a civil right. And so this is really important that this is, while there is like new legislation in Minnesota around this, it is tied back to civil rights legislation at the federal level, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so the Minnesota state statute that's referenced here and that the language access plan is built on is directly connected to that. And the language access plan that we're developing is a very comprehensive document that will outline all of our district's commitments and processes and procedures that we'll employ in order to ensure that all of our community has equitable access to services for those who speak languages in addition to English. Some specifics that are included as well for us to provide more direction and clarity. The first is that during a formal public school board meeting, the plan, our language access plan, must be adopted within this school year. That's one of the requirements. In addition, we have to have some standardized processes and procedures in order to provide effective assistance to our students and our families and our staff. One of the requirements is that we use trained or certified interpreters for all communication that is related to academic outcomes and progress or placement in specialized programs or services. I'll just like put a little note in about this because this is maybe one question that frequently comes up. There currently is no state certification or training specifically for interpreters working in educational settings. There are some for interpreters in healthcare settings and in legal or court settings, but not for education. So this is something that we will also be developing and working with some others to develop that can be more specific to educational settings. And in addition, we have to ensure that there's meaningful participation in individualized education program process for families as well. The other really big focus in the legislative requirements are around public accountability. So there's a lot of accountability that we have to our public. First, we have to be communicating about the plan and the services that we provide to our community in many ways. So it has to be in our handbooks, it has to be available online. We have to take other steps to notify families of their rights and the services that we would provide. The school board has to review and approve our plan. We have to make adjustments to it at least every 2 years. And we also need to implement a review and appeal process so that if needs are not met, we are looking at those and responding on an ongoing basis, not just every 2 years.
So, good evening, everyone. So the core folks you see here were part of the core team leading the language access plan process. In addition to the individuals here, there was a larger group of stakeholders that were convened to start the work. This included elementary and secondary principals, resource managers, we had representatives from early childhood and adult basic education, enrollment and nutrition services staff, also information systems, human resources, and student services staff, along with our multilingual communication specialists. So we began the process first with really understanding what the language access plan was and the purpose of why we need one and need to have one as a district. So our broader stakeholder group, we got together to complete our comprehensive self-assessment. Okay. So the self-assessment focused on the 6 key areas that you see here on the screen. And they were identified by MDE, or Department of Education. And it required us to really take a deeper look at where we are as a system and what we need to prioritize as we're moving forward with developing a language access plan and improving our language access that we provide to families and scholars. So once that was completed, the assessment helped us understand our overall performance as a system. And then we divided up into focus areas where we identified key priorities, gaps, and initial ideas for improvement. When we were in the smaller group working, we further analyzed the data to build on the findings that we had from our self-assessment as a larger group. And this work led to what we developed in this draft that you see now for the language access plan. And so as we continue the work, we need to really gather feedback from the broader community, especially our families, to help refine and strengthen the plan.
And so just to look, the small groups all worked on each of these 6 areas. So we're just going to talk a little bit about how this happened. So the first area was around identifying and assessing families' language communication needs, and then we kind of went from there. And so there are 2 different plans that you're seeing in your packet. The first is the public-facing plan, and it's about 10 pages, and it includes everything starts off with our commitment and the purpose, and then it will include context for the plan and the main components that we are providing around language assistance services, families' rights under the plans, our staff roles, and training. The internal plan goes into much more depth and much more detail about the expectations that we have for our staff to implement the plan, how to access resources that support the plan, and the training that everyone will engage in. As I mentioned, the plan, both the internal plan and the public-facing plan, start off with a commitment that we are stating for our community, and that is what I would like to read out so that everyone who's listening might be able to hear. So our commitment statement is this: Osseo Area Schools is dedicated to ensuring that every family has timely and meaningful access to information and services. With more than 125 languages spoken in our district, we're committed to providing multilingual communication that promotes the inclusive participation of all community members. This language access plan provides information about tools, processes, and resources available for students, families, and staff at Osseo Area Schools. This plan aligns with Minnesota Statute 123B.32 and federal civil rights laws to ensure students and families can participate fully in their education. So as our small groups worked and as we're thinking about the areas that we're focusing in on, we wanted to share a little bit with you, also to provide some more context about where this work begins. And that is with identifying needs that families may have for language assistance services. And so where this starts off is during enrollment. All families complete a Minnesota language survey as part of the enrollment process. And the results of that are stored within a student's profile in Synergy, in our student information system. There's a field in Synergy called home language, and so that information comes from this language survey. Families can also identify their preferred language for school communications and whether they would benefit from interpreter support. And so that also can happen during enrollment and then on an annual basis via the back to school verification forms and processes in Parent View. That is also where families can update their preferences for language communication at any time. And they can also contact, there are certain staff at schools who can also make updates to those language preferences at any time. After we identify needs, then we're also focusing in on providing language services. So one of the things that we shared with our leadership teams this morning was that we're not starting from zero, right? We have a lot that we are doing. We have a lot of capacity that we've built over time. And one of the things that came out of our self-assessment and our small group work is that we need to have greater coherence and consistency around the procedures and processes and the use of our resources, because how they're utilized might look quite different in one space to another. And so that's part of what we're working to change through training and through providing more expectation around how the plan is implemented. You can see on the side that there are examples of things that we currently have in place. This morning we had a couple of our multilingual community and communication specialists who were with us at our meeting, who were sharing with some of our families. They work directly with students, families, and staff every day in our schools and are one of the main ways that we provide language assistance services to our community. In addition to that, we have a variety of electronic resources that you can see listed here. And then part of what we are doing based off of the work that we have done in our small groups is we're creating some additional resources. So based off of the work that our groups did, we are creating some like welcome posters that share more about the services we provide, but also send a message about being so glad that people are here with us. Providing some cards that families can use to indicate that they need assistance, that they could bring into schools, that have some of the like maybe most common reasons that they would want to connect with someone, so that they have that as something that they can take and like get started on their own, to have some agency in communication, as well as letting us know what they need. We're also, in addition to like the spoken interpretation or written translation, things that we already support, we're adding in ways for families to request that. Right now, everything is created based on requests of staff. And so one of the things that we determined that we needed to add in was a way for families to be able to indicate that they would like to request interpreter support or a translation of a document. And so we're enhancing some of the services that we have had for some time, as well as adding in some additional things that we're doing in order to respond and to actually meet the commitment that we have stated.
Dr. Harrell, Chair Prince, Vice Chair Brooks, and members of the board, thanks so much for the opportunity to share tonight on this topic. With all the services that Kirsten was just talking about, we want to make sure that people know about them. So this next coming year, you'll see a lot more about that with all of our different stakeholders. So as staff, we want to really make sure that they know all the different ways that they can get this out to families, and then know how to utilize them as well. So we'll have some step-by-step guides. We talked about maybe making like a booklet with some lists of things. We also have that information on our staff portal right now, but we don't know if people are aware of accessing it. So we want to just kind of put that front and center. There'll be some training as well with that. So really today, kick that training off a little bit. And we're going to be talking more about that at System Leaders in August. And then also we wanted to make sure families are in the know, right? So just making sure that we actually have a communication plan started, making sure that we do this in all sorts of different ways, like the I Need Assistance card, welcome posters, sharing it out in our digital formats as well. There's so many different ways. We have a lot of tools in things that we already are translating, so just making sure that we get the word out there. And then community-wide too, we want to make sure that everybody is aware. Our Have You Heard newsletter and school websites, those things are translated or have access to some translation. So just making sure that people are aware of that. And then we have that communication plan. If you're interested in diving into what it is thus far, you can go to that website to do so. And then these are just some sample communications, specifically with the poster and cards that we're developing. So you'll see this soon, but the idea, as Kirsten mentioned, with the card is people can pick that up either at the office or events, and they can keep it with them and show as they need. And then the posters, we would foresee that in main offices, but it could be elsewhere as well throughout the school. And then staff roles and responsibilities. So earlier today, we were really centering on like the department and principal roles, but with you this evening, we're focusing on the school board piece of that. So really just making sure that we're following as the state has asked that we review this every 2 years. So we're going to be doing that with some surveys and some check-ins with families, just to make sure that everybody's in the know that we're meeting what we need to do with laws as well. So, but you can see it's gonna take a lot, really all staff, I would say, to pull this off in the best capacity and ensure that consistency across the district. So, really, our cabinet team, we have a communication specialist, the department, we work together closely a lot with community relations and multilingual. Like I said, principals, site leaders, departments, our office teams, they're sending out a lot of communication, so we want to make sure that they know all the ins and outs and how best to utilize the tools that they have, then teachers as well, and then all staff. So this is more on that reviewing of the plan. So every 2 years, we're going to be taking a close look at that based on what we're hearing from families. And we just want to make sure we're not waiting every 2 years to get feedback, but we want to make sure that we're making a concerted effort to update every 2 years as we're getting that feedback along the way. So as I mentioned, surveys and meetings are going to be the way to do that. And then we have what we call like an appeal process or feedback. So people, if they are feeling like their needs are not met, they can connect with the school. That will be their first point of contact. And if it's still not resolved, they can reach out to us at the district office. We have that directly in that public facing plan, and then they'll get a formal response back from the district office. If, again, only if they feel like their needs aren't being met, but we wanted to make sure that we captured that in that public plan.
A little bit of additional detail on the internal plan for staff. So there are very specific pieces of information and procedures for staff about how they can access and then also provide service. And then we'll have lots of training coming up. So in addition to having to figure out and provide training and certification for all the interpreters that will be working in our system, which is brand new, we also have to provide annual training to all of our staff. And so we'll have some universal training that will be for every staff member in the system, and then we'll have some differentiated training that's very specific for particular roles. So for our front office staff, for example, there will be some specific training catered to how they will typically need to respond in their interactions with our community. Same thing with our nurses or our teaching staff, our enrollment center team. So we've identified some groups for at least this initial year that will provide some differentiated and ongoing training for, and then we'll continue to develop that as we move through. And then also, we'll be doing a lot of internal monitoring of our implementation and where we need to focus, either support or provide additional resources. And so one of the things that we have done is we have asked each site and department to identify what we're calling a language access champion, so that they can assist us with doing that work in each site and in each department, and they'll be kind of the connection between the district team and what's happening at the school or the department level and families. So they are kind of the hearing from all sides and reporting back, helping us to collect some data about how we're doing with implementation and helping to provide that ongoing support or training where that's needed. What's happening right now? Right now, we're gathering some family input, and so some of what we shared today, this morning with our learning leaders is some of the listening session that we're conducting with our multilingual community right now. So we're reaching out to families, and we've started with families that are connected to our team of multilingual specialists, and so they represent those top 5 languages in addition to English, so Hmong, Spanish, Somali, Oromo, and Vietnamese. And then in addition, we want to make an intentional effort to also connect with families from language groups that are not represented by multilingual specialists, because we have a feeling that their experience might be quite distinct because they don't have people that they can go to all of the time in our system, and so we want to learn more about their experience as well. So we've got some listening session work that's happening over the next few weeks. And in addition to that, we have more of like a survey, and it's available in many different languages, but it's fairly intensive to try to get a lot of really valuable input from our families about what their current experiences are and what would be helpful. As mentioned, we have started off with some of our staff training. So we had at our May operational learning leaders, and then just today at our system leader meetings, we started making those connections. We have more planned for when we come back together in August. We may be making some adjustments to our plans based off of the feedback that we're getting from our families over the next few weeks. But we're planning to present the plan for board vote on June 23rd.
Chair Prince, did you want to share it all? You were able to see it this morning.
Yeah, the parent guardian panel was extremely impactful, hearing directly from them with their translators and from themselves, kind of where they saw gaps, kind of what their experience has been. So one of the gaps that I heard was maybe not getting as much information about their child in the classroom because of that communication barrier, and wanting to have more access to how their child's doing, more check-ins, and kind of just that difficulty when because we don't have translators at every site every day, and that difficulty of if something if they need to come in or they need information be able to have somebody. I think the importance of an actual person was also a highlight to me. So the multilingual specialists and how key that relationship was to their experience, that human connection and human relationship, that rang kind of loud and clear as well. So there may be technology, there may be other things, but that does not, from an experience, that does not replace a person. So that was huge. When I look at language access, what our vision should be is not simply timely and reasonable access. Our multilingual parents and students should have the same experience as every single other student. So I think our vision should be that their experience is as quality and as good and as seamless, just regardless of the language. So I think that's kind of what I took away this morning is, really hearing from the parents. And I know you had some on video, and it might be beneficial to the board to maybe take one or two of those videos and send it to the board.
Yeah, we can
or cut some segments from it. Very powerful.
And I appreciate what was shared today too, and Kirsten, that her team's done great work at the Enrollment Center. We infuse a lot of multilingual learning staff in August specifically when we get a crush of families coming in. I have I know I'm not on the board, but I have a question. I have a curiosity on, because I got to spend some time at the Enrollment Center consistently for a few months back in the day, and I heard the language line being used. Boy, I bet when I was interim Enrollment Center coordinator for 8 months, I bet you I heard the language line being used 6 times an hour, even on the off season, and during August, the whole time, and that included with 5 people there. So I have a lot of curiosity on, it goes back to your people specifically trained in medical fields versus people helping answer language line being utilized to answer technical questions that come up to enroll into a school specifically. So that's something I'm thinking about. I know you're going to work with teams, but I'm just curious how effective we think now the families light up when the person's voice comes over the speaker and they're speaking the language that they speak. So that happens like that. But there's still some back and forth with my English speaking, the receptionist who's helping them at the front window. So that's a description of what's going on, but also some questions on language line use and effectiveness is something I'd like to see.
Yeah, they mentioned it today. Did you?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, and it was interesting, the example that the young woman gave, that her experience was not great in the hospital setting.
Yeah.
It was better in the district setting of language line, but also that you can't see what they're working with. If they have a document, or it's just still not the same.
It's
right?
not,
People are always better.
Yeah.
As I was thinking about the AI conversation and efficiency, as you were asking about that, in this case, people are always better. But, you know, we are also looking for efficiencies
Yeah.
with that, because one of the things that we have just recently done is we purchased a translation memory software platform. Because right now, we translate everything from scratch every time.
Mhm.
So, part of what we know will happen as we move to implement this plan is that we will see the amount of translation requests increase from across the system. Because right now, we definitely are not translating all of the communication that needs to be translated across all of our sites. So as we're trying to think about how we can possibly keep up, that's one of the things that we've invested in, and that we're like using the summer months to try to get our team of multilingual specialists really proficient at, because if we're able to create things within translation memory system, that will save the work that we've done, and when we see something similar again, it will help like pre-fill some of that back into like what's coming next. And so as we think about things like that common course catalog, like for example, right now that is not translated. That document is many, many pages long, and it gets finished right before registration opens. Like there's not enough time for us to do it. So we've made some adjustments as we go to try to have more of a process that keeps some things, more things consistent from year to year, so it's feasible to actually do a translation of that. And if we have a translation memory system where we work in to do that, then when there are some small adjustments from year to year, those are the things that will be like highlighted from the system, and we can focus our energies on that versus having to retranslate an entire like 95-page document that can't happen in a span of a couple of weeks. So we're making some investments in trying to figure out how we do use technology to assist us with these aspects of our work, and we really need to keep that connection to people whenever possible, because that's where we get the most high quality interactions, which then really promote that connection between family and home and build trusting relationships, because we're showing that we value the experience of our families and providing the highest quality of information, just like is available to our English-speaking community. So trying to figure out how we can bring in some of that, but at the same time, that's part of what we need to have more consistency and coherence around our sites, around when we're using our different tools, and when, like, part of what we're creating are some expectations around when do things actually need to be translated and by a human, and when do we need to have like in-person interpretation happen, when might we be able to use some of our other tools, like language line, etc. So those are all things that we're working on and that are part of our plans.
Wouldn't be able to take any savings from kind of the communication translation in print and reinvest that in people, right? Would be great.
Yeah, that's true.
I'd also point out the multilingual specialist brought up the fact that understanding kind of the broader circumstances that our multilingual families are facing, that many of the students are working.
Yes.
And working at night, and just having greater empathy and understanding from like where they're coming from and how that affects their access to education, how that affects their educational experience.
Academics, maybe.
Yeah. So so it's a very powerful experience to hear directly from them.
Some of the things that stood out to me, and I'm very blown away by this presentation, it's very cool. The families that I've met with that are either first generation in America, or a lot of their friends are first generation, have shared that it's very uncomfortable to ask even for this, or they don't know that this is available. So I love that you're making it so accessible, and I think that's really appreciated. And I think it's really amazing that we're meeting people where they're at. And so thank you for all of your work. I know it's such a small sliver of it, and you're trying to get an iceberg in it, but thank you for your hard work.
Yeah, I mean, I love everything about this. I think everything's already been said. I noticed the commitment uses the word meaningful instead of reasonable, to your first point. But I would support us updating that commitment to ensuring that our families have the same access to information as our English-speaking families. Other than that, I look forward to approving this report. So you made it easy. Thank you.
I did have one side question, because I'm noticing that we've got some, large groups of certain languages. Do we offer any instruction in native language, or is it only English?
That's a good question. So really just at the high school level. So we have classes at the high school level for like heritage language speakers in Spanish and Malay. Also senior like in Arabic for some time. I'm not sure if that's continuing for next year.
What about like teaching math or some of our like core instruction in native language where we have
No, we don't have any immersion programming in our district.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, where there's critical mass, like, it's really hard and difficult, like, you're learning the language, and you're not getting all of the instruction, because you're not speaking the language, so it's just a curiosity, like, as we see our numbers continue to grow, is there other options that we have, so that, because I don't want kids to come here and fall even further behind, because because instruction is English only, so it's just a wondering.
Well, and this is a great area we could connect with community partners. I know a lot of people that worked with a lot of the Ukrainian families when they came over, and helping them pick up the English language outside of school, and then would also attend school meetings with them to help them understand, like take notes and talk about it later. So this could be an area where we could leverage community, because I know so many people want to help in this way. And the last point I was gonna say, I totally forgot to say this, was my daughter one time came home and was like, there's a boy in my class and he doesn't speak any English. And I'm like, how do you even communicate in that situation? And it just was such a, like, it just puts you in that kid's shoes of like, this would be so hard. And the parent's shoes of not understanding what their kid is learning and sending them off into the unknown in some ways. And then the teacher, so it's such a all-encompassing issue. So I think that it puts even more importance on it. So.
It was wonderful with the parents, because they were speaking in their language, and we're all like, we didn't understand them either. But we do have a new translator, Ukrainian Russian.
Yes,
Yeah.
Starting, what day is it, Tuesday, Thursday, we're adding an additional multilingual communication specialist who is a Ukrainian, but also Ukrainian and Russian speaker. So we were able to add that through a grant that we received from the state called New American Support. We're hoping that continues to get extended. We'll find out about that soon, but so we're always looking at ways that we can continue. If you can see the chart, you notice that those are like our next largest language groups, but also some of our newcomer community, as you were mentioning. So trying to find ways that we can continue to enhance those people-based support that we can provide, because we know that those are so meaningful for our community.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Howe, did you have anything before we?
No, we can wrap up. We're building our
right.
calendar. We're building our school board calendar, so we don't have to do that this evening. So.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, meeting adjourned at 8:42. Thank you.
Thank you.